Kan jy my hoor? Okay, evening, ladies and gentlemen. We would like to start. So can I ask please, those of you still standing around, you can just see.
He did put it on.
Ja, ons kan dit nou 'n bietjie die volume. Hallo. Sê nou beter. Kyk my is nou beter. Moet jy die mic so 'n bietjie nader hou en dan sal die volume ook opstel. Dankie vir dit. Dan blykbaar hierdie een ook aansit. Daar's hy. Goed, dames en here, baie welkom by vanaand se publieke vergadering, spesifiek rakende die offsets studie wat dan gedoen is in Aalwyndal. My naam is Karel Venter, ek is die direkteur by beplanning en ekonomiese dienste, Mosselbaai munisipaliteit. As you can hear, I'm starting in Afrikaans, but we will also speak English. The presentations will be done in English, but you are welcome to ask questions in Afrikaans and either then also in English. Eers baie welkom. Voordat ek gaan verder gaan, ek wil graag vra dat ons wijksraadsit Botha, dat u asseblief die verwelkoming doen. Baie dankie.
Dankie Karel, goeienaand aan elkeen van u. Baie welkom hier vanaand. Ons almal weet waaroor die vergadering gaan. So ons gaan dadelik terug oor die span om te begin met die tegniese voorstelling. Ek vra kom ons steek net gou eers die oor. Hemelse Vader, wees met ons vanaand in hierdie vergadering en wees ook met ons soos ons huis toe reis na die vergadering dat almal veilig terugkom by hulle huise. Amen. Baie dankie en baie welkom. Ons gee dadelik oor.
Goed, ons gaan 'n bietjie harder sit terwyl Jaco besig is met dit, gaan ek so hard as moontlik probeer praat. Net dan, soos ek gesê het, my naam is Karel Venter. Ons het ook vir Jaco Roux wat ons bestuurder is by Stadsbeplanning Mosselbaai munisipaliteit. Dan het ons ook vanaand hierso ons konsultantespan wat vir die voorleggings gaan hanteer vanaand en ook dan die tegniese bydrae gaan lewer. Dit is Jackie Dabrowski. Pronouncement, is it correct? Thank you so much. And then also we have Douglas. Douglas, your surname is Veritas McFarlane. Yeah, is that 100%? Spot on. Thank you so much. Then we also have our colleagues from the Provincial Department of Environmental Affairs. It's Gavin Benjamin. Gavin, welcome. Also Dani Swanepoel, as well as Rian Thompson. So welcome all to this meeting. Our communication team is also present tonight. So you'll see some of them moving around here. Okay. We will proceed as follows. I will ask Mr. Roux, Jaco, to give us a background to the project, what happened and why we are here tonight and where we are in the process. So he will do that. And from there, he will then give over to the consulting team to do the presentations for us. And after that presentation, we will open it up of course, for questions, and hopefully we'll be able to provide you with some answers to your questions. However, kan ek graag vra, ek weet hierso is ook mense vanaand teenwoordig wat nie grondeienaars of potensiële ontwikkelaars is in Aalwyndal nie. Julle is meer as welkom, baie welkom. Ons wil egter graag met die ronde van vrae, as dit moontlik is, laat ons eers vir die Aalwyndal inwoners, want ek dink dit is die concern mense, die concern parties. Ons wil graag vir hulle die geleentheid gee om eers die vrae en antwoorde te hanteer. Ek is bekommerd, hulle gaan nie die geleentheid kry nie en dan gaan ons baie lank aangaan. Geen probleem met die lengte nie van die vergadering nie. Ons kan hier wees tot môreoggend, maar ek dink dit is nie regverdig teenoor die grondeienaars nie. So ons wil graag vra dat die grondeienaars eers die vrae stel en daarna kan ons vir mense wat nie inwoners is van Aalwyndal die geleentheid gee nie. En natuurlik is dit nog steeds oop na die vergadering en 'n tyd daarna om vrae aan die munisipaliteit te rig. So, goed, dit is dit. Jaco, ek gaan vir jou die geleentheid gee om vir ons dan agtergrond te gee van die projek. Baie dankie.
Yes, good evening everybody. My name is Jaco, I manage town planning. The Aalwyndal project has been coming a long time. I've been busy with Aalwyndal since 2018. where the first document is actually prior to that. Aalwyndal was identified in a growth option study that was done for Mossel Bay as an area that we can densify. And then subsequently in the 2018 Spatial Development Framework, the area was identified as an intensification area as per that recommendations in that growth option study. Now the growth option study basically indicated where's the best areas for Mossel Bay to grow. And since Aalwyndal already have an off-ramp, all the major services are available at the bottom of Aalwyndal. The main sewage line, the main electricity intake from Eskom is there. So there's a lot of existing infrastructure. So we then decided to compile a precinct plan. As you all know, if you're an owner in Aalwyndal, that yellow plan, which we did, that was based on high-level environmental information that we had at that point in time, and we developed a plan and it was approved by council. I must be clear that that is the one document that was approved by the Mossel Bay Council. Right? Then in 2022, we did a spatial development framework again. That same proposals of the Aalwyndal precinct plan was incorporated into the spatial development framework. And that is how it is today. That's another document that was approved by the Mossel Bay Council. The spatial development framework and then also the precinct plan. Those plans, both of them facilitated about 8,000 residential units in the area, and we also did our service master planning according to that. I think then we realized when the first developers started doing environmental studies on their separate plots, they actually realized that there's much more environmental sensitivity. And then we did several municipalities then decided, listen, let's try and help the owners as a collective. And not let everybody go through his own offset investigation or own environmental application, not application, but studies. And then we said, listen, let's get information. So then we did several studies, which culminated into the realization of the sensitivity in Aalwyndal, of which this sort of forms part and is an end product of years of investigations. This was also confirmed by a lot of separate studies by different owners. I think I'm going to stop here because that's where we are now. The document that we presented today is a draft document. It's not approved. It's not enforceable to anybody at this point in time. That's why we're here. We want to get your comments and your inputs. If you don't want to speak here tonight, please send it through to admin@mosselbay.gov.za so we can incorporate it into the document and consider every one of the comments. I think that's it from my side.
Okay, Jaco, baie dankie vir daai agtergrond en ek dink dit gee hopelik vir almal 'n beter idee van hoe alles bymekaar steek en hoekom ons dan hier is vanaand. So ek gaan dan nou oorgee aan Jackie om vir ons voort te gaan met die voorlegging. Baie dankie. Thank you, Jackie.
Good evening, everybody. I hope everybody can hear me okay in the back and whatnot. Just give me a thumbs up at the back if you can. Thanks. Yes, sorry, I will be doing it in English because I think I'll become utterly confused if I have to try and explain all of these complicated concepts in Afrikaans. I think your ears will burn. I'm the project leader for this project, and I'm joined by Doug McFarlane this evening, as mentioned. And I've just listed a few of the primary steering committee members that were involved in our project as well at the bottom of the first slide. But I'll try and take us through as quickly as we can because I know that we have limited time and there's a huge amount of information in the reports. You would have seen there's 5 different reports in the series. It's a lot of information to digest. At any one time, it's even difficult for us to remember, was that in report 1 or report 2? How did we deal with this complex little issue or this side issue? So we really understand that it's a complicated series of reports. And so an event, public participation like this is essential to try and clear up any misunderstandings or provide clarity for any issues that are not clear. So we really do understand this is a complicated set of reports, and we'll try and improve your understanding and clarity on all of the issues as far as possible. All right, so just to introduce our team, these are the main people who were involved from the Confluence side. So it's myself as project leader, and I'm also an aquatic specialist. That's my primary speciality. And I was also involved in fieldwork, mapping, and report compilation. And my husband James, who can't be here this evening, but he's my co-director at the business. He's also an aquatic specialist, but was involved in mapping, reporting, GIS calculations, etc. Then Bianca Fichet and Kim Daniels are both here from Confluent. They are our biodiversity specialists. So Bianca specializes in botanical or plant surveys. She's also an ecologist and helped tremendously with the fieldwork and mapping, report compilation as well. And Kim did the same, but from the faunal perspective. So that's all looking at the different animals. So those were the main people involved from our team. And then on the biodiversity offset specialist side, that was a requirement of the terms of reference of the project from Western Cape Government, was that we must have a biodiversity specialist on the team. And so we got one of the best in the country, and that is Doug McFarlane, who is here with us now. And Doug has worked on biodiversity offsets extensively and for quite some time now. He was also involved in the detailed costings and report compilation. All right, I don't need to then spend too much time on the project background because Yaku already did that. And maybe I went into a little bit more detail. Some of it you can see there, it's not entirely all important, but it's good to know for history. How did we get to today? The original farm was divided into 5 to 10 hectare lifestyle plots in around 2004. And currently there's about 73 urban, mostly in the, well, actually all in the urban area, covering an area of about 600 hectares. So it's quite a large area, the entire precinct. They are zoned for residential 1. I think there's only 2 properties that are zoned agricultural 1 at this point. But I would say that at a later point, if anyone has questions about zoning, that would be for the municipality because that is not my field of expertise. Currently, landowners have the right under that zoning to develop up to 2 dwellings at the most per earth. So the current land development right is restricted to 2 dwellings under that zoning. The strategic location of Aalwyndal, as Yaku mentioned, is the reason it was identified for future urban expansion. And various precinct plans have been proposed by the municipality and other consultants, and I will show a little series of them for comparison later on. This growth potential and this node of development was identified by property developers who proceeded with property purchases and development applications on various urban. But as Yaku mentioned, every time these sort of applications were put forward and environmental specialists had assessed the sites, they came back saying, sure, there's a lot of environmental sensitivity here. And so applications were not being approved because there was a lot of environmental sensitivity being picked up, even quite some time ago. So now there's a few acronyms in this presentation. DEDP is Department of Environmental Affairs and Development Planning. They then suggested that a piecemeal approach to offsets, because that's where all of that was heading, could be avoided or should be avoided in favor of a strategic plan for the entire precinct, which actually makes sense. Instead of looking at each little individual earth from a piecemeal perspective and everyone paying a consultant to do an offset study, which could result in an offset over there or over there, and nothing working together, they said rather look at the precinct as a whole and we develop an offset plan for the precinct to enable development. So that led to the Western Cape Government's Department of Economic Development and Tourism funding the project that we then undertook. The project aim that was given to us in the terms of reference was to resolve the conflict between highly sensitive ecosystems and the need for high-density residential development. So it's an acknowledged issue that there's a need for high-density development, but it's at conflict with sensitive ecosystems. To facilitate trade-offs between competing land uses and to optimize and expedite development in the future development area. And that could only be achieved with a strategic plan for the entire precinct instead of these individual little plans on a per-earth basis. And I've just put a quote here which sort of sums up the offsetting process. Yaku and Carl also mentioned it in their podcast. If you haven't heard it, you should listen to it. But it basically says there are no solutions. There are only trade-offs. and you try to get the best trade-off you can get, that is all you can hope for. And this offsets are very much a situation like that. You sort of negotiate, there's a lot of push-pull, and at the end of it, it seems no one is really happy. But that's more or less when you've come to the end. But we are trying to actually keep everyone happy as far as possible, and you'll see we've really gone through a lot to try and achieve the best compromise, or as I've said there, the most advantageous compromise that we can through this project. All right, so I think it's also important to just acknowledge the status quo in Aalwyndal in terms of rights and responsibilities under existing legislation, mainly environmental legislation, but also town planning regulations and that sort of thing. So right now, even if we put this whole precinct plan into the bin and the whole offset report into the bin, these are the current existing rights and responsibilities under existing legislation at a national level. Landowners are legally obliged to selectively remove and control listed alien invasive vegetation on their land. That's in terms of NEMBA. The clearance of more than 300 square meters of indigenous vegetation. Are you not? Sorry. The clearance of more than 300 square meters of indigenous vegetation in a threatened vegetation type, critically endangered or endangered, requires authorization in terms of NEMA, even if indigenous vegetation has been grazed or is invaded with alien plants. The deliberate degradation of sensitive habitat through excessive burning or other means is regulated under Section 28 of NEMA, which is the duty of care. That requires that any person who causes significant environmental degradation takes measures to prevent, minimize, or rectify the harm. The development of more than 100 square meters within 32 meters of a watercourse requires authorization in terms of NEMA, and certain activities within the regulated area of a watercourse, for example, defined as 500 meters from a wetland, require authorization in terms of the National Water Act. Development of structures or infrastructure of more than 10 square meters within 32 meters of a watercourse in areas mapped as CBA or ESA. Just for those of you who don't know, CBA is a critical biodiversity area and ESA is an ecological support area according to the Provincial Conservation Plan. And then development of more than 2 residential houses or changing the land use. If you change from residential to light industrial, for example, on a property will require approval for rezoning by the municipality. So environmental sensitivity cannot be ignored, whether the offset plan is supported or not. Future potential development rights are not guaranteed because of the current zoning. And there are limits around how one exercises one's existing development right. It requires approval. So that's the status quo. Our presentation this evening is going to follow that of the report series. I think you all know there are 5 reports. So Doug and I will each be presenting on the reports that we sort of compiled the most and are the most familiar with. And that way we also get to share the presentation a bit. So I'm going to commence with the revision of the Aalwyndal precinct layout. In each report, we're starting off with the scope of work. This is the scope of work that was provided to us by the Western Cape government. So this is what we were asked to do in the project. So firstly, for revision of the precinct layout, we were asked to maximize development potential and densification while avoiding biodiversity impacts as far as possible. Secondly, to apply the mitigation hierarchy to the precinct as a whole. Then the optimum precinct plan must be accepted and agreed by the municipality, DEDP and Cape Nature. We need to indicate no-go areas, offset areas within the precinct, offset required and no offset required areas. And finally, consider work that has been done on precinct layouts to date. So it was quite a large scope of work. Here I've just included an explanation of what the mitigation hierarchy is. You will hear it referred to quite often. And it's important to understand what it is and what it means and the process that it underpins. So it is an international best practice approach for impact assessment, and it fundamentally guides and underpins impact assessments, not only in South Africa, in many countries around the world. And what the mitigation hierarchy does is it says that you should invest the majority of your energy in avoiding or preventing impacts to begin with. So can you avoid putting a road through somewhere, or can you avoid building a shopping mall on this sensitive habitat? Can we put it somewhere else? Secondly, if you can't avoid it, can you minimize the impact? So instead of building such a big shopping mall, can we build a smaller shopping mall? Or can we adjust it slightly to move that, or to avoid that population of sensitive plants? Finally, or not finally, second finally, can we rehabilitate some areas that are degraded around that? So that would be the third step in the hierarchy. Then if all else fails, we get to offsets. So that's when there's unavoidable impacts or residual impacts after we have exhausted all of the steps of the mitigation hierarchy through the avoidance, minimization, and rehabilitation options. Once we've done all of that, and there's still impacts left over, those are called residual impacts. If those residual impacts are considered significant, then an offset will be required. So I hope that makes sense. All right, then what is a biodiversity offset? I think it's important to just explore this a little bit more, because this is a whole subject of our report series, and it's not always clear to everybody what exactly it is. So the definition says it's an intervention that has the purpose to counterbalance the residual negative impacts of activities on biodiversity through increased protection and appropriate management after every effort has been made to avoid and minimize impacts and rehabilitate affected areas. So you can see that biodiversity offsets are inextricably linked with the mitigation hierarchy. We have to take all of those steps first. At the end, if we need to, we still need to offset. And offsets in South Africa are governed currently by the legislation that was gazetted in 2023, which is the under the National Environmental Management Act, the National Biodiversity Offset Guideline. So that was on the 23rd of June, down at the bottom here. So that is the guideline that we used to inform all of the work that we've done as part of this project, but along with other guidelines as well, and legislation. So it's important to also understand what is expected from an offset area, because there's quite a lot of principles underpinning the selection of an offset. So offsets must be the final option in the mitigation hierarchy. I think I've said that now 3 different ways. It's the last option after everything else has been tried. Ecological equivalence, or like for like, is another way of talking about it, is the preferred offset type, although trading up can be considered. So for example, if you are undertaking an offset in an endangered ecosystem type, the offset committee might consider, if you can't find that same endangered ecosystem type in a suitable area, or there's some reason it won't work, they might consider you looking at a critically endangered ecosystem type as an alternative. That would be considered trading up. Irreplaceable biodiversity cannot be offset. So basically that's considered a fatal flaw in the environmental impact assessment process, and it cannot be offset. So this is biodiversity that is just not replaceable. Very unique populations of plants or animals that just will not, like you can't relocate them, they can't be moved or anything like that, with a very restricted distribution or something along those lines. The significance of residual impacts on biodiversity must be considered in decision-making involving biodiversity offsetting. So we have to do an impact assessment, and we have to work out what the residual impacts are of that development. Biodiversity offsets should embody the ecosystem's approach and promote connectivity in the wider landscape. So biodiversity offset that's completely isolated and, with high, what we call in ecological terms, edge effects, would not be a suitable offset. We need to encourage and promote connectivity in the landscape so that there's movement and, population exchange as far as possible with plants and animals. Long-term protection and management of priority biodiversity must result from a biodiversity offset. And actually the guideline is quite clear on this. The protection is meant to be in perpetuity, and the financial management is supposed to cover a period of 30 years. The design of offsets must be evidence-based and transparent. So the work that we do to try and identify both the affected ecosystems as well as what we refer to as the offset receiving areas. Those are the areas that will be protected in exchange for those affected ecosystems. We need to be clear and transparent about how we assess them and what is there. A risk-averse and cautious approach must be adopted. That also sort of embodies the precautionary principle. And offsets must be fair and equitable. So that's not always easy to achieve. The timing of interventions requires that offsets occur before impacts. So that's another important criteria. You can't undertake the activities first and then offset later. Offsets must be measurable, enforceable, and auditable. All right, so one of the aspects covered in the scope of work was that we needed to engage with a steering committee. The steering committee in our case comprised, sorry, is someone, yes. Yes. Okay, my apologies for that. I can go a bit quicker if it's going to help. It's just I'm not sure whether everyone has had the time to read all of the reports.
We have, indeed we have.
Okay.
I think we're at a point where, this is your business, your skills. You guys are brilliant at this. You're talking to laymen, especially myself. To go through all this again now, I've even forgotten my first question I wanted to ask. So, we've gone through the documents. I don't know how many more pages you have to explain to me.
Why don't you
Look,
ask
there's
the show
quite
of
a
hands?
few. What I do have is already a preliminary list of questions that have been supplied as part of the public participation. So we already know quite a lot of your questions, and I've tried to weave answers of the questions throughout the whole presentation in a way that makes logical sense.
No, we've read it and we understand it. Thank you. You can answer our questions. That's what we want. Thank you.
I think that's where we need to get
Okay, ja, Jackie. Okay, kom ons kry nie so 'n bietjie orde dan aan die verrigtinge. Ek dink Jackie hulle het voorberei en hier is dalk wel mense wat belangstel in die voorlegging, maar u hoor nou die sentiment, die wat belangstel in die voorlegging om die voorlegging wel te wil hoor. Indien dit dan die geval gaan wees, dat ons gaan aanbeweeg en ons gaan moontlik vir haar vra om na die einde toe te gaan van daai voorlegging en dalk opsommend te wees, dan gaan ons baie inligting mis. Maar dan was dit u keuse gewees vanaand om die inligting te mis. En dan gaan die verantwoordelikheid by u self wees om dan maar weer deur die dokumente te gaan en dan die nodige inligting te kry. Ons kan dit so hanteer. Neem net kennis dan wat Jackie nou gesê het, is baie van die vrae soos wat ons die vraag gekry het, wat baie van die inwoners van Aalwyndal aangestuur het, het sy ingewerk om te probeer antwoord reeds in die voorlegging. So dit gaan dan nou nie gebeur nie. En dan gaan ons reguit dan oorgaan na vrae toe. So ons wil net nie tyd mors nie, maar ons kan dit doen. Dit is nie 'n probleem nie. Ons moet dit dan net ordelik doen. En soos wat ek gevra het, ons moet net aan die begin dan moet ons die vrae hanteer eerstens vir die Aalwyndal inwoners, so ons moet net dit dan ook respekteer. So dit is 'n moontlike opsie tensy daar 'n ander voorstel is.
Miskien as daar skies, ek praat nou van die kant af, miskien is daar 'n opsomming van die elke slide en elke punt om te gaan nie, dat almal net
Okay, daar's 'n voorstel, die van julle wat nou nie daarin gehoor het nie, daar's 'n voorstel via van die mense wat nou op Teams ook aangesluit het, is of daar 'n opsomming is. Jackie, I don't know if there's a summary of your presentation. Most probably not. No.
No, there is a summary report, but not of the presentation.
Okay, so
no.
there is a summary
but look, I can
report.
gloss over quite a bit of it. If you would prefer me to go quicker through it, then I can do that.
As I understand the thing, book 1 and 5 is the most important pertaining to the Aalwyndal community. So if we can maybe cover that, just to make sure that everybody understands it properly. And then if this could maybe be made available to the public to download on Facebook so they can go through it in their own time. Because forcing all that information right now onto people who are already exhausted is not fair.
I understand. I think that's fine.
Maybe a question.
Actually, yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. I'm sure everybody appreciates what you guys do for this assessment, right? And I think it is important.
I just want to, the question I have is how many plots was surveyed?
That's a whole slide in my presentation that I can. So what I was going to actually suggest, and it speaks to that.
Let's just do the following, because I need to facilitate the meeting and there's a number of hands, and I need to give direction to us now. So, Jackie, you said you can quickly go through the presentation. How many minutes will you need? 10 minutes for that?
It might be a bit longer, but listen, I can go much quicker. It's fine. And we also got the impression that it was report 1 and report 5. So we have got the most slides on report 1 and report 5. You know, we've understood that from the feedback that we've got. So we don't have a lot of information on the reports in between because they're quite self-explanatory. So if it's fine with you, I can skip through. Ja.
Okay. So ek dink daar begin ons bietjie rigting te kry en ek dink dit is fair. Jackie verstaan nou waarvoor jy hierso is en wat se inligting jy soek en ek dink ons gaan vir haar kans gee. Ek sien die hand. Daar was 'n voorstel gewees. Nee, ek dink ons gaan by dit uitkom. Dit is eers heeltemal reg. Ja. Ja, ongelukkig die verslae sal nie. Verslae is maar in Engels, maar daar kan opsommende weergawe dan sodra mense dit ons die weg vorentoe bepaal, jy weet, kan ons dit dan na Afrikaans doen. Hier's 'n voorstel.
Van die PowerPoint presentation, soos hy daar is vir ons beskikbaar wees.
We can make it available,
yes,
yeah.
Absolutely.
Want to see more, can go on that and see more, but once it
Okay, good. Let's strike a balance here. I'm going to take one more suggestion and then I've got an idea now. So daar's nog 'n voorstel.
You said it will be part will be in English and part in Afrikaans. Will you repeat all of that now in English?
In English, yes, I will, especially my way forward. Okay. So there is a suggestion, there was a good indication here that report 1 and report 5 are the ones of concern for the residents of Aalwyndal. What Jackie said is that her presentation is specifically then speaking about report 1 and report 5. So most of your answers, or many of your answers, I'm sure that will be, hopefully, she will attend to in her presentation on those 2 reports. So we're going to give her just 10 minutes, Jackie, to go through that as quick as possible. I will time you and I look into that.
Okay.
And then we will give opportunity to the residents then to ask questions. But yeah, okay. Well, I think that's the best I have. Maybe I should just speak like this. Yeah.
If you hold the mic like this, then it's better when you start going.
Hy moenie so wees nie, hy moet so wees. Okay, Jackie.
Okay.
We are wasting time. Let's do the presentation
Yeah.
and conclude on that. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Okay, thanks for the feedback. Then I'm going next. This slide is literally just about the competing sort of, I don't want to say competing actually. This is about everyone's different opinions that needed to be balanced when we had our steering committee meetings. It is nice to look at this when you can look at the PowerPoint presentation on your own because it's not in the reports, but it gives you a bit of perspective on the types of perspectives that we needed to juggle when we were revising the precinct plan. So the comments in black are from the town planning side, in blue is from DP, and from Cape Nature was those in green. So these are the types of agendas and perspectives we were trying to juggle. All right, so when revising the precinct layout, fundamental, and it was actually not really a major part of our scope of work at all, but fundamental to the revision of the precinct layout was determining ecological sensitivity. And I know there have been quite a lot of questions about how this was determined. I just first want to say that in the line of impact assessment work, when you undertake these biodiversity specialist assessments, when there are very large sites, like a 600-hectare property, which we do routinely undertake surveys for instance, for solar farms or wind farms and that kind of a thing. Very often, you'll be given 1-2 weeks max, if you're lucky, 2 seasons, but normally just 1, and you have to just assess representative areas within that site. So the level of detail that we've actually undertaken in terms of ecological sensitivity for Aalwyndal in impact assessment terms has been really high. So I know it might not feel like it if we haven't actually visited your plot, but we've used a wide range of different methods. And I think DEDP can probably attest to the fact that, they assess impact assessments all the time, so they know the level of detail that specialists usually go to. So here I've just got a description of what ecological sensitivity is, and it's just important to note that it's not only sensitive animals and plants, but it also can be landscape features like 1 in 4 slope gradients, and obviously watercourses as well, and then areas identified as critical biodiversity areas and that sort of thing on your provincial conservation plans. So this explains why the revision of the ecological sensitivity was necessary, because a previous precinct plan did present the ecological sensitivity, but there were some issues highlighted in it when we reviewed their report. And that was that firstly some new protocols had been gazetted in 2020 for the assessment of animal and plant species, so those new protocols were now in legislation and were expected from DEDP to be implemented. Ecological sensitivity mapping, it's a fundamental basis for revising the whole precinct plan. It directs where the corridor needs to go. If there's going to be a conservation area, it needs to be aligned with areas of high sensitivity. And if our confidence in those areas is low, then we might be putting the corridor in the wrong place. The previous studies were also largely done at a desktop level with minimal ground truthing, so we needed to add that element in as well. And in terms of the offset guideline, areas of very high sensitivity cannot be offset. They're not offsettable. So we also really needed to have a high level of confidence in where these areas are that are deemed very high sensitivity. So this was really quite fundamental to revising the precinct plan. So our approach was to take both a desktop and site-based assessment, which is typical. This is an important map for anyone who wants to know what properties were assessed and where we walked. Literally, you can see where we walked. There's a GPS track of where we walked. You can see the yellow properties are where there's been a direct assessment. That's not necessarily by us. It could have been another consultant, because we also obtained from DEDP 37 biodiversity specialist reports from 22 different properties across the precinct. We reviewed every single report that has ever been done on Aalwyndal, whether that be for birds, for plants, for anything. So we reviewed all of those at a desktop level, so we had higher confidence for certain plots than others, especially where there'd been direct specialist assessment. From that, we could work out our confidence level, what the vegetation type was, whether there were any known threatened species on a plot. And we also identified gaps and areas of low confidence that we could identify and work on through ground truthing at a later point. Then with our site-based assessment, we've done over 20 field visits to the area. That's both in the capacity for this offset project, but also when we've been appointed by private landowners for their development applications. So you'll see some of the properties where we've walked around a lot, we were appointed by that landowner to do biodiversity specialist assessments for their development applications. So that gave us really good insight into those properties. But remember, there's a thing called line of sight. When we're standing on that property, we can also look all around and we can see, okay, that neighbor, the vegetation is continuous there, or this neighbor has got clearing over there, or that one's got a house over there. But also just remember that from a desktop perspective, you can see all of that very easily as well. And I'm going to show you an example of that now. So we employed a wide range of survey methods when we were in the field. It included putting out camera traps on sites where we were doing assessments, recorders for recording bird calls, frog calls, that kind of thing, sweep netting for insects, all this sort of thing. So it's just typical biodiversity assessment methods. This is just an example. I don't know if you want me to spend a lot of time on it, I probably won't, but it just gives you some insight into how clear some of the ortho photos are that are available on Cape Farm Mapper. So you can see, for instance, there's a house with some stuff piled behind it. We would have graded that as a very low SEI because it's a clear area of disturbance. Same with this, someone's made like a quarry type of a thing or a rubbish dump there. That's also a very low SEI. The resolution is sometimes so high that you can even see here purple bushes. You can see they're in flower. So if we know what that plant is, we can literally say, well, that plant is there. If we know that that plant is associated with areas of high disturbance from an ecological perspective, then we can say, maybe there was some disturbance on this site. So we can actually gather a huge amount of information just even at a desktop level. So I thought I'd give a worked example of how we apply the SEI to just a random rectangle that I cut out. So if we look at this rectangle, over there looks like relatively intact vegetation, although it's got a couple of tracks through it, but okay. Down the side also looks like relatively intact vegetation. And mind you, this is just at a desktop level. This would have been ground truth later on. Over here, there's been some quite serious disturbance. And then at the bottom, some slightly less serious disturbance, but you can see some vegetation has been pushed and piled up over here. So how would we allocate SEI to that? Now, I'm doing this very simplistically, but if you read in the reports, you'll see there's a lot of layers of information that go into the SEI. So it's not a clear-cut, I'll just thumbsuck and go, oh, that's a low sensitivity, that looks high. There's a lot of layers, but in a nutshell, it would have looked something like this. So you've got your high SEI area at the top and running down the side, and then this is low. But what happened here? If we were doing this at a desktop level, we would then look back and see, okay, on Google Earth, this looks different. In 2020, that exact same piece of land was covered in vegetation that looked like continuous with the other high sensitivity vegetation. And then in 2021, the same piece of land looked like that. So now we can see what happened in that area, and it was cleared, but not earth moving. So it's quite likely that this vegetation, if it was left to recover, would actually retain some of the semblance of the natural vegetation type, in which case we'd allocated a medium SEI. So that is an example of how we would work that out. All right, then these are just pictures of animals that we found and plants throughout the precinct. But just to highlight that, especially with the plants, this is on one property that we've assessed, not across the whole precinct. One property has that range of species of conservation concern. So the species diversity and richness in Aalwyndal is really phenomenal. We can't actually overstate that. It really is important. All right, this is what the previous consultant's sensitivity map looked like. And this is the map that we then refined and updated with our sensitivity map. So actually, if you sit and carefully put these maps side by side, you'll see they're fairly similar. But we've got the added benefit of having done all of the additional surveys. And you will also see that we don't have such straight lines. Our lines are more wonky because it's far more refined. So our SEI map ended up looking like that. And that is the first layer that we use when revising the precinct layout. So this is using the methods that I described. And remember, the very high SEI is non-offsettable. The medium to high SEI areas would require an offset if they were developed. And the very low and low SEI, no offset would be required. The next couple of layers that were used when working out where the corridor should go were where the water courses were, so any wetlands, streams, drainage lines, in-stream dams, etc. And then the 1 in 4 slopes, because 1 in 4 slopes are also, development is not supported there anyway by the municipality, but they're also quite sensitive to degradation, just given their topography. And a 30-meter buffer as a standard was applied to all of the watercourses in 1 in 4 slopes. Again, the application of protective buffers for sensitive areas when it comes to impact assessment is a very standard mitigation measure when applying the mitigation hierarchy. You will barely read a biodiversity assessment for any type of development where there's no buffer recommended. The application of buffers is a very standard avoidance approach. All right, so the first plan from Mossel Bay Municipality looked like this. That was their open space area, but as Jaco said, it was based on very little actual on-the-ground information. The next plan looked like that. That was from Sharples. So that was a bit more based on their sensitivity assessment that I showed you. Then there was another plan that was by Brownlee and partner, and that was based on a revision of the precinct plan in 2021. And then finally we have this one. But I just want to emphasize this is version 5 that we produced in our report series. So just to really point out that this is not something that we drew up in 2 minutes flat. We came up with version 1. There were many comments from our steering committee, and so on and so forth through to 5 versions of this layout. So, as I said in the beginning, we are really trying to juggle quite a lot of different objectives and, just objectives when it comes to revising this core area and the layout of the precinct. I think the rest I won't cover here. Yes, this also just shows this shows the spread of vegetation that was covered in the core area as well. And I think this is quite a helpful picture just for understanding that the areas in more purple are more the Renosterveld vegetation type, and then the areas in the yellower color are more the Fynbos vegetation type. So actually the core area covers those vegetation types and transitional sort of pieces in between quite well. So there's a fairly equitable split between both vegetation types there. All right, so what that ended up with is that the core area measures around 300 hectares in extent for our plan. It's 49% of the precinct area, with the remaining 313 hectares or 51% that's developable. That's broken up into 1.2 hectares of very high SEI, which we just couldn't practically get into the corridor, 96 hectares of high SEI, and 67 hectares of medium. At some point, and I won't hold Jaco to this, but he did actually indicate that by his calculations, with those areas remaining, we could get 4,100 units at 20 units per hectare, and around 380,000 general lettable area in terms of
gross lease area.
Oh, what's it?
Gross lease area.
Okay, gross lease area for commercial use. All right, but with that loss of vegetation that's still going to occur, what we end up with is a high residual impact. So after we've avoided and minimized our impact through implementation of the corridor, which preserves around 50% of the vegetation, the sensitive vegetation types and sensitive features in Aalwyndal, we are still left with a medium to high residual impact, which means that we have to do an offset. So we know that we have to do an offset because that's what we were appointed to do, but this just shows we followed the process and we get to the same conclusion. All right, I'm going to hand over to Doug. I hope that's helped for report 1.
Okay, dit is verslag nummer 1 gewees. And before we move over to the actual offsets and how it was determined, can I get any questions in terms of what Jackie just presented here? Any questions to her on this? Daar's 'n vraag?
Jackie, you lost me with your first sentence when you said it's a very sensitive area. But in 2016, sorry, is verkeerd, is 2016, 2018, I received a letter from DP to say it is the least sensitive area for rezone. And in your whole presentation, you went on how sensitive it is. Now, the interesting thing is, in my EIA, there was nothing that was sensitive. And you also said that you looked at a lot of other EIAs. You would like to see that. We would like to know where are those sensitive areas. By the way, it doesn't affect me at all, as a matter of interest. Because at the end of the day, this is more political than anything else. And the Aalwyndalers knows it. The reality here is that at the end of the day, it is not sensitive. See, it is a rhetorical question. You want to tell me that Aalwyndal, which was sold because it was worthless by one of the previous mayors of Mossel Bay, sold it. Now suddenly it's so sensitive, it is more, you want to tell us it's more sensitive than a lot of places like Monte Cristo, an operating farm, Outeniqua Bosch, operating farm, Hartland, right next to the sea. It's a rhetorical question, so it's not for you to answer. The reality is, we would like to know, why is Aalwyndal suddenly so important not to be able for the individual owners to develop. Why suddenly are there sensitive areas, but in my EIA and the others that I also know about, there was nothing. There was nothing. It is something is not right. And that is what bothers us. Because at the end of the day, there are two articles in the Constitution. Article 9 and Article 32, which by the way overrides any legal thing that the municipality wants to do. The bottom line is, I've got a letter from DP, a letter, to say it is the least sensitive area to redevelop.
Okay, thank you. I can't answer for... I can't answer on behalf of DP, and I don't know what the letter is. Maybe if you can provide us with the letter, we can see what context it was written in, because it's not really my field. But what I can tell you about the individual urban within Aalwyndal is that there's a wide variation in sensitivity because of historical changes in land use. So 20 years ago, if someone on Earth A cleared all of their vegetation, they would not have triggered a listed activity back then. But now today, they might have just a lawn basically on their property. And that's very fortunate for them if they want to develop, because that vegetation was historically cleared. It's going to get a low or very low SEI rating on our report. And unfortunately, that person becomes the kind of winner, as it were, when it comes to development opportunities compared to somebody who their vegetation is still all intact and everyone goes, oh, but this property is so sensitive. So yes, as a whole, the precinct and the surrounding area is very sensitive. It's got very unique vegetation. It's got unique animals there, endangered animals that occur around there. That is a fact. And I'm stating that as a scientist, not as a political affiliate of any sort whatsoever. It's of no interest to me. So the fact that there's some questions about how sensitive Aalwyndal is and where that's coming from, it's come from many independent science specialists, or biodiversity specialists, many of them are accredited with our professional governing body. We have to act independently. It's a declaration that we sign for every single report that we do. So we've got no agenda in saying that there's high sensitivity there. I mean, the flowers that I've shown you, but that are all either vulnerable or endangered or whatever, those exist. Those photographs are all taken in Aalwyndal. But as I say, there's variation in vegetation cover between plots. When it comes to the other developments around Aalwyndal and the questions, because that's been asked quite a few times, how come Renosterbos was developed, Monte Cristo, I don't really know it very well, but yeah, these other places. There's a couple of things about that, and it's one of the questions that we answered at the end, so we would have gotten to that anyway. But the biodiversity offset guideline was only gazetted, as you saw, in 2023. So if a development was approved before that, there wouldn't have been such a strong emphasis to apply for biodiversity offsets. But there was always the Western Cape offset guideline. So there was a provincial guideline for offsetting. It just wasn't as rigorously applied as offsets are being applied now because of the gazetting of the biodiversity offset guideline in 2023. So that would be one reason. But then you'd have to look at the EA, which is the environmental authorization for those individual developments. It can be that, for example, my understanding potentially of Renosterbos as an example is that the area that it was developed was actually historically degraded. So if the specialists went and did their assessment and they said, yeah, look, around here it's very high sensitivity, but this particular area where you're going to locate your development, that's relatively low, that can sometimes be approved. But what I can also say is that right now, Aalwyndal is definitely not the only place that's undergoing offsets. I am right now working on at least 2 other projects in the garden route, one in Mossel Bay around Kwanongqaba. So it's applying across the board. It is not targeting anyone in Aalwyndal. It is not victimizing anyone in Aalwyndal. That is not the intention.
I don't agree. I absolutely don't agree.
Okay, kom ons moet ander mense ook net gou Kom ons gee net gou ander mense ook 'n geleentheid. Jy het 'n vraag hierso voor. Jy kan maar vra.
Ek het nie 'n vraag nie, I've got a statement. You are talking about fairness. I want to know, we have been in Aalwyndal for 30 years. We've looked after our property because we love nature, we love animals and plants. So I've really looked after, against this wall, and because he wanted to clear a few times, I said, no, we need to look. But now we're old, we want to sell. No one's going to buy my land because you have taken 90% of my land. The person next to me, his land is now sterile because he has put in ostriches. So I am being targeted and not him. Is that fair? I want to ask you.
Okay, I think that is a very fair question. So, Jackie, you want to maybe respond to that one,
I'll
please?
try and answer that very difficult question.
I think maybe if you can just go back to your maps.
Sure.
We can understand it better.
You just tell me which one. I'm going back. This one. This. Oh wait.
Everybody walking around on the properties.
Okay. That one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now you pointed out the one property where you guys were on, yes.
There. Yeah.
Now you said how did you determine that? By desktop and by walking on site? What other means did you use?
Well, we come out, I mean, Kim and Bianca. Oh, sorry. We come out with all of our paraphernalia, which involves sweep netting, binoculars, I don't know, guys, what else are we bringing?
Sorry to interrupt. You did say that you would then look at other neighbours around there.
Absolutely,
Okay,
yeah.
so I'm adjacent to that one that you've now highly densely.
Yes, yeah.
Which shows empty, doesn't show any colour. So nobody was on my site.
Yes, quite likely. But if you have a look, there are also point surveys that we've done, not around your site, but I mean, if we walked along the edge there, then we'll look over there. This area is extremely flat. Okay, and remember also, if we look at the quality of these ortho photos, we can see very clearly, if I can see...
Okay, sorry to interrupt.
Oh, wait.
We can just move on again to the next one because I've got a point where I'm going with this.
Okay.
So let's go on to the next one then where you showed it.
That.
No, further on. Next.
That.
Yes. Now the colours.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now you said that the light yellow, that's doable, the light orange is...
There's the...
No, back to the same plot, the same area where you were, there where you did the high density.
That's here, yeah.
There. So now it's still showing the other one now in red is no-go.
No, red is not no-go. Red, well, unless it's in the core area, we have to then go to the core area with the green on. Yes, okay.
Fasiliteer dat ons nie daarby ook uitkom. Ek dink dis belangrik dat die mense dit ook weet.
300 meters up there, right into the farmer behind.
Ding is praat oor verslag 5.
The same type of vegetation is going without going over there.
Yes, and we can look with binoculars as well. So, I mean, it's quite, we've spent so much time in this precinct
I
that...
understand it. I'm just trying to get it to layman's terms where you guys are getting what you've got. So, now the farmer behind me, if we go now to the green, the core.
Okay, hold on. There.
Yes, that one. So now if we look at it now.
Yes.
So now we go back to the same plot where you guys was all purple.
There. Yeah.
So now, what's happened, what's changed there?
What do you mean, what changed there?
Well, all along it was fine, but now you've got a core area on there that is no-go, you can't do anything on it.
Okay, so why that core area was put there is because it connects well to the natural areas beyond the precinct over there, which is where we identified...
Which used to be a farm where Millie's grew.
So if it's that sensitive, you can buy it. You can buy it at the price that I could get before you started. You can buy it, you can have it. But you're going to have to buy it from me. I'm not giving it to you.
So, okay, sorry. I was still talking specifically that one where you guys were on.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's changed. Now there's almost half of it's gone its core area.
Yes, to try and get a connection through there, because standard sort of corridor widths.
Just behind where you guys said you could see everything at
yes.
this side. There were no drones flying over there. There was nothing else going on there.
We did use a drone periodically above the property that we assessed over
Did it
there.
go over my property?
No, we used it as part of their assessment.
Okay, so the drone doesn't affect my property. So why is that one now all of a sudden totally virtually?
Sorry, I think we are, I've got lots of respect for your question, but I think each and every person here in Aalwyndal got exactly that same concern. Yes. Yes. So, and I think Jackie has tried to explain how it was done, and I think that is as much as we will get out of this meeting in terms of that specific process here. But we've got lots of other things to cover. So I see a hand there.
Hang on a minute. Why are we there? I want to know why is mine earmarked
Targeted.
for the amount of
The borders are 100% straight. I've never seen plants growing like that.
Okay, there's a very valid question, and I think it will link up to your question as well. So there's a question here, why are the borders straight? I think, Jackie, maybe you can respond to that one. I think that's valid. Thank you. Yes.
Sure. The gentleman asked why are the borders so straight? Because he's never seen plants growing in such a straight line. I'll explain that. While the borders of the core area are quite often straight, the borders of our high, medium, low SEI categories are often not straight, as you would see.
I'm not talking about the core area, I'm talking about between the plots. Because I've got a neighbor with a straight fence. This side is a different rating than that side. So how is that possible?
Exactly.
There must be something different either about their vegetation or it's a connection. I think the thing is you must just ask directly, maybe in the public participation, or you can see me afterwards or something, and we just, and I also included a whole table in report 1 that listed every single property, and I sort of gave it a tick if it ticked a box for why it was included in the core area. So if it had,
That's why.
yes, well that is also an issue which I highlighted before, and that is, I'm pleased that you looked after it, but unfortunately from a development perspective, it doesn't really serve you in the long run. But that sensitivity would have been there regardless of the offset project. As I said earlier, if we throw that offset project in the bin today, that property can still not be developed because it is still covered in sensitive vegetation.
I hear you, and I appreciate your love for plants and the nature and who you are. But what I want to ask you is, why take 90% of my property and the person next to me 0%? Why? Why can't you go to the municipality and buy a farm?
There's a lot of red blotches out there.
Kom ons gee 'n kans hier. So
I understand.
let's do the following. There's been people on this side that they've putting up their hands for a long time. They are very patient. So I'm going to allow them to ask a question. Meneer, u is baie welkom.
Aalwyndal is bounded on 4 sides by open land. On the front side, sitting in front of our property on municipal land and farmland. Why is this not being considered as an offset area?
Yes.
Because Aalwyndal is an island, innocent, but a
Yes.
small island.
Okay. Yes, there are, offset opportunities outside Aalwyndal, and we have considered them for the offsite offset obligation. It's a bit of a mouthful to always say that properly. So you would have seen in report 4, no, I think it's 4, yeah. You know them better than me, maybe. Report 4, that the offsite, the ground truthing and whatnot, which is in this presentation, but I think we might skip over it tonight. But we did investigate all of those sites, and all of them would definitely qualify as like for like, 100%. But remember, the mitigation hierarchy that governs all of the impact assessment processes, that best practice that we have to follow, it says step 1 in the mitigation hierarchy, you must avoid impacts and minimize impacts. And the corridor is seen as an avoidance and minimization step. So, obviously if we went back to that previous precinct layout that the municipality had produced, that was a tiny, minuscule corridor. It barely even had a buffer around any water courses. It was a skinny little thing running through the precinct. That would have resulted in the loss of areas of very high SEI, which is not consistent with the principles of the biodiversity offset guideline. It would have resulted in the loss of vegetation that was very high sensitivity and was considered a fatal flaw. It's a fatally flawed development layout. So this layout considers the avoidance and minimization steps as a primary driver for that justifies the conservation corridor. Yeah, Doug is going to add something.
Good evening, everyone. I also just wanted to say that in terms of the way this corridor was designed, it was designed purely from an ecological perspective. It was based on environmental sensitivities. I think the reason to now have a meeting like this is to get feedback, but also just to say that as much as our team came up with the initial corridor, you'll see it's version 5 here. And the reason for that is there was an attempt to balance already between the municipality, who was wanting more development, Cape Nature, who was wanting more protection, and the department, who was trying to find a balance as well. So what we get here is essentially an initial attempt at trying to find a balance of what it means to have some development while also allowing key areas that are sensitive to be protected. So I just wanted to make that clear. It wasn't just Jackie and myself, for example, saying this is the layout. It's been through a lot of internal discussion over 6 months to a year to get to this point.
Okay. Ek dink ons moet ek sien die hand, ek gaan nou vir u kans gee. Ek wil net 'n gedagte by u los. Iets wat ek ook baie van min weet in hierdie verslag is presies hoe die offsets gaan werk indien dit sou goedgekeur word. En dit is waaroor verslag 5 dan spesifiek gaan. So miskien moet ons daarby ook uitkom voordat die aand dalk te lank raak, want ek dink daar kan dalk ook baie vrae wees. Ek los uit die gedagte by u, maar ek het 'n vraag, u kan gerus vra.
Beware of this, tortoise, whatever. We all love nature. That's why we live there and we live there. So the people that want to develop now, what I'm thinking is, why can't it be more fair? Why can't it be that we do look after this, but maybe I'm just putting a number up there, maybe 10% of each plot, everyone's plan should be towards conservation and to let it all. So it's a more fair situation.
Yeah, I think that is a very valid question. So I'm going to allow Jackie to try and respond to that. Maar as u nie wil huis toe stap vanaand nie, in die volgende voertuig CBS 54844. Weet nie Olga, wil ons weet wat se voertuig dit is? Is dit 'n Toyota? Is dit 'n Toyota? CBS 54844, die ligte is aan. O, motorfiets ook. Yes, ek moet net kyk, is dalk nie my kar nie, maar dit is nie my kar nie. Goed, ons gaan eers daai vraag hanteer. Jackie, thank you, Olga. Jackie, you want to respond to that one, that why can't there be maybe an overall approach of, let's say, a 10% or a 15% or a 20% of each property that goes to conservation?
Thanks, Carl. I would so love if that could work, and it would be a very nice, simple, it would be a wonderfully simple approach to solving this issue. Unfortunately, though, the layout of the corridor is based on these environmental sensitivities. So a plot like the gentleman was talking about earlier, where they cleared all the vegetation 20 years ago, and now it's just a lawn, the value of including 10% of that in the corridor would be really questionable. Unfortunately, we can't rescue and relocate all plants. Some can be rescued and relocated, and that's always a mitigation measure. But and we have actually included some areas of low sensitivity in the corridor where it forms important connections. But, the corridor follows areas like the watercourses. It follows the steep slopes. And then it also has to incorporate the areas of very high sensitivity. So these are, if your property happens to have a steep slope and a watercourse and, for instance, a population of threatened plants, it just might end up that you end up with 50% of your property in the corridor because all of these things now align to your property ending up in a bad place in terms of this offset plan. But while some other person seems to be enjoying the benefits because they may be on a flat land and the place was cleared 20 years ago and there's no sensitive feature around them. But what I can say is from an equitability perspective, for example, I think if you one example here where, you sort of look at what we try and weigh up when we're coming up with different parts of the corridor. This area along here was a relatively new addition. The reason that I added that was because we didn't have a lot of representative vegetation being included in the upper flat areas. That was going to be a big fat open area of development with very little fynbos preserved in that area. And it also meant that all of these properties didn't have any core area on them, which didn't seem equitable when almost every other property in Aalwyndal did have core area on it. So the result now is that only 8 properties in the whole of Aalwyndal don't have any core area on them. And they would either have extremely low sensitivity or they're just very poorly connected. But what is another sort of layer of sensitivity on this is that Cape Nature were constantly reminding us of these populations of threatened plants. So certain areas where there are these threatened plant species, you'll see, for example, this odd little box of conservation area over there. That's about threatened plant populations that Cape Nature were adamant needed to be incorporated into conservation area. So there's a little story behind every single line that is drawn here that has gone back and forth multiple times between all of the stakeholders involved in this steering committee. So that's the best I can answer that. So the 10%, it's a nice idea, but I just don't think it can be practically implemented. Thanks.
Maar ek wil tog daai 10% hê as amptelike kommentaar, né? Op die dokument. So ek sien nie hand hierso en dan kan ons dalk nog 'n vraag vat en dan wil ek graag hê dat ons oorgaan na verslag nommer 5 wat dan die offset gedeelte gaan hanteer en dan gaan ons weer oopmaak vir vrae. So die dame hierso voor, u kan gerus vra. Let me just repeat what I've said is I'm going to take 2 questions. There's a hand and there was 1 hand there as well, the lady here. The rest of you I will definitely allow at the end of a presentation regarding report number 5. So yes, you may, please.
Okay, so according to National Biodiversity Offset Guidelines in the Environmental Management Act, staan daar, en ek gaan nou nie die hele paragraaf lees nie, maar ek gaan net aanhaal wat van toepassing is. The EIP or specialist would also need to engage with landowners, holders of rights in land and other stakeholders in the landscape during this phase. Nie met ons eienaar is daar engage nie, genoegsaam in elk geval nie, en ons is stakeholders. En in julle eerste en deur die dokument praat julle van stakeholders en engagement en om hulle te betrek en insaag te kry. Ons vra van verlede jare van Jackie, I had this conversation with you where you told me specifically we must get the municipality to respond and to give us information or get a meeting so we can be informed. And this was 25th of August 2025 was the first time we actually got something out of the municipality, more than a year later. So according to this act, this whole study cannot be valid because there was no communication with the stakeholders of our property.
Thank you. Yes, I think that, there could have probably been more done to involve the stakeholders from an earlier perspective. Yeah.
Can I just add?
Yeah.
I spoke to Yaku last year and I offered Mossel Skier as a venue to please bring and he's shaking his head, is that true? Yeah. To come and talk to us as owners before this biodiversity plan is released, so we can hear straight from your perspective what you are busy with, because we heard rumors of things that was frightening us, and we are all, our nerves are wrecked.
I can really understand that. Can I just quickly say one thing, Yaku, then you can take over, yeah. I think it would have been preferable to have done this, but I just want to say, to have done this earlier, but I just want to re-emphasize, these reports have not been finalized, they have not been formally adopted. You now have a full set of documents that you can feel free to send any comments and feedback on. If you feel that your property... Yes, guys, the whole point of the public participation process, as it is enshrined in our law, is that we are obliged to listen to what people's comments are. It can definitely still change.
Okay, ek dink daai was 'n baie goeie inset en kommentaar geweest en ek dink jy is reg, ons verskil nie daarvan nie. Daar was net nog 'n hand en ek dink dit gaan nog regverdig wees. Ek het vir die dame gesê ons gaan vir haar volgende kans gee, so kom ons gee gou vir die kans. You may please ask your question.
Ek wil graag weet, soos by Renosterveld, wat so toeties bedryf het, want die 50% daarvan is verlore en die doelwit is om 27% te bewaar. Hoeveel persent daarvan bewaar word deur hierdie core area om by te dra tot die teiken en gaan dit die status van die landboutype dan verander?
Okay, so just to repeat that question in English, the question is about specifically the Renosterveld. Now we all know that that's a highly protected vegetation type, and I think the question relates to the percentages and how much will eventually in the proposal will be saved in terms of the Renosterveld.
Thanks. Quite a lot of the Renosterveld, and I think Desiree, the report includes the specific number of hectares, but I can't tell you off the top of my head. But a large proportion of the remaining intact Mossel Bay Shale Renosterveld was included in the core area because it is critically endangered. So areas of, that were still considered to have a low disturbance score, where there was still high value Renosterveld, they were all marked as very high SEI and therefore had to be incorporated into the core area. But it's also, helpful to note as well that we checked again, there's actually 0% of Mossel Bay Shale Renosterveld in under statutory protection at present.
Yes, my question is actually, how much does this contribute to conservation of Renosterveld? The target is 27%. So does this actually reduce that target?
Yeah, we have calculated it, but we don't have it off the top of our head. I don't know, is it in the report, Doug, or not?
I don't think it is, Jackie.
I don't think it's actually in the report, but if we have it as a specific question, then we provide the specific answer. We have all the information to work it out.
Yes, that would be good, because if this contributes, say the core area contribute, and the offset, say the core areas contribute to reducing the Renosterveld to just endangered. Just implementing the core.
I doubt it. I really don't think that it can do that.
Okay, I'm just saying,
because it's not that big an area. Yeah, in the grand scheme of the map vegetation types. Yeah. Okay. But anyway, as you know, I mean, those assessments of vegetation type threat statuses only happen every 5 years or so. Then they get gazetted, and I mean the likelihood that, considering that Mossel Bay Shale Renosterveld is under pressure from multiple developments, not just this one, it's likely that the threat status will only get worse, can't get worse and critically endangered, but that it's going to get less. Yeah.
Okay, kom ek vra almal, kom ons staan net op vir so 10 sekondes. Almal staan net gou op. Jammer, ek is nie onderwyser nie, maar ons trek net bietjie bene, laat die bloed vloei. Die wat gou badkamer toe wil gaan en dan gaan ons weer aan, net so vir so 30 sekondes. Dankie.
Oh, no, I need some more.
Help my down, please.
Yes. Can I quickly get some water? Sorry,
Sure,
I'm
yes.
so dry. But I'm going to come right now, yes. Yeah, okay. But I will...
Was hy. Nou is ek ook weer op die lug. Okay, ons gee net gou kans dat almal net weer hulle sitplekke inneem en dan gaan ons voortgaan. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Yes. Let me do this. We were, whilst you've raised your issue, there were a lot of people that raised their hands on the same one. And if I'm going to allow you to continue, they will again raise their hands. Yes, but can we do that afterwards, please? Just to give direction to the meeting. I really thank you for giving me that respect. Ons gaan terugkom na daai vraag toe. Okay, Douglas, thank you.
All right, thank you everyone. So I'm just going to be jumping straight to report number 5. So between report number 1, there were 3 other reports. One of them was looking specifically at the offset targets, which means if you develop on a sensitive area, how much do you need to compensate? And we landed up settling at a ratio of 4:1 as what was recommended. And just to say, in the national guidelines, it could be up to 30:1. So 4:1 was what was set. We had long discussions around that and looked at some of the costs for that as well. And what it meant is that if all the areas outside of the core areas were developed, there would be an offset target of around about 640 hectares that would need to be conserved to compensate for the impacts in Aalwyndal. And what I'm showing you here now is just how the phasing of that offset implementation would work. So you'll see on the x-axis there's the number of properties, and we've assumed a sort of a set offset requirement per property. But essentially what would happen during phase 1 is as offset obligations arise, the idea is that the money would fund on-site conservation. Okay, so it would be used to secure those areas and manage them first before trying to find areas outside of the precinct. All right, but at some point, that money is going to be, or the areas that could be secured when it comes to around 300 hectares would run out, and you'd need to then find land outside. And at that point, it would be looking at areas outside of the precinct. So that's the phasing. Just to say that as a team, we did use some key guiding principles. One of them, as much as I think there's a room for more equitability, it is something that was on the minds of the team. Okay? One of the things is that we felt that all residents are going to be benefiting from the conservation areas at the end of the day. The idea is that those areas get managed very well, that they're there for biodiversity, but also for appropriate public use. So it could be actually a very important open space for this community. So just to say, as part of the security risk there, the fencing was a clear view fencing is planned around all of these areas, and also with managers and security. So all of those costs have been built into what this area would look like. So hopefully what you would land up with, if the plan was implemented, would be a very well conserved and hopefully very secure open space system in Aalwyndal that everyone would benefit from. That was the desire. So should I finish the presentation first, I think?
Ja, nee, sien, dit is hoekom ek gesê het ons moet oorgaan na hierdie deel van die, want ek het ook baie vrae wat in my kop is. So kom ons gee net gou vir hom kans om klaar die voorlegging te doen en dan gaan ons die vrae hanteer asseblief. Nou baie dankie.
All right, thank you. Also, then another aspect was around, how much should each person pay for the offsets? Because the on-site conservation is much more expensive than it is to secure land outside. So we felt that actually it needed to be equitable. So whether you have to pay for offsets now or in 20 years' time, it needs to be the same. So we built that into the process as well. And then there was also concern that landowners with large areas of core habitat, they might need to pay for that management. Also, they might need to put fencing up around those areas, which would be very expensive. So we tried to build some of those costs, for example, fencing, into the costs for offsets. So other people would pay for the management of those core areas. They would also pay for the fencing of those areas to try and make it more fair. But I think the overarching principle is the one of polluter pays. So basically, if you're someone who has got very sensitive habitat on your property and you transform that, you have a higher offset obligation than someone who doesn't have sensitive habitat on their property. So that is how it works, and that's how it works anywhere in South Africa according to the biodiversity offset guidelines. Just in terms of the way these offsets would be paid. Okay, I think we've moved on now, so hopefully we're right. So in terms of the financial model, which is really how these areas would be paid for, the idea would be that it would be split between offset contributions from developers. So if you're a developer and you develop in these areas that are highly sensitive, you would have to make an offset contribution. That would then go towards the management of the on-site areas. But the reality is that more funding is needed than just would be coming from those developers. So the idea was that conservation levies get contributed by anyone living in Aalwyndal in the future as development proceeds.
Say again?
Can I finish the point, please? Yeah.
Everybody in
So there's two options here. The one is that you increase the offset costs. So in other words, the developer has to pay more, but someone has to pay for the offset.
So we have to buy a property twice.
You don't have to.
Okay, can I ask you, who made the decision, or who decided that we as owners have to pay for the offset?
It's not yet decided.
Okay, so I think the important thing is that in terms of this plan, whoever has an impact on the environment, there's an offset obligation that goes with that, all right? And that is scaled in terms of how much one develops.
Yes, if you want to take a hectare of my property, the government has to pay me out and the offsets have to be carried by the government. Why do we have to pay and lose our property? Jackie mentioned earlier, the offset should be fair and equitable. Yes. But it doesn't state anywhere in the law that the owner has to pay for that. Then it's either municipality or the government to pay for it.
Yeah, I think the requirement is always that the impactor has to pay for it. That is the requirement. Have a look at the guidelines. I've been doing offsets for 15 years. The person who has the impact is responsible for compensating for their impact. So if it's the government, if the government owned a piece of land in Aalwyndal, and there are other pieces of land where they're going to need to do offsets, and there are areas where the government has to do offsets, if they impact on an area that's sensitive, they're responsible for fully paying for that. That's how it works. That's the requirements.
And I'm not going to develop. Why do I have to pay for the poor? Exactly. There's no impact.
So I think what you're saying is really more around how the benefits from conserving areas that you own, you're asking, does that contribute to my offset? Is that the question that you're asking?
No. What I'm saying is, if a section of my plot, let's take her section, is 80% or whatever of the plot, is already her plot, and she conserved it already. Why does she have to pay a levy to conserve her own field, her own plot?
Okay, so I think maybe what I can do is let me get on to some worked examples. And just to say that this is a proposal, right? Okay, we'll get on to some worked examples and you can see how it would work in practice, and then we can take it from there, all right?
It is a law. My question is the law. It is law.
The guideline says this is how it should be applied.
Sorry. Okay, let's just give. Yes, I fully understand what you are coming from, and the same questions are also in my head. But I think the responsible thing is just to listen it out, because maybe we'll get some answers there. If not, we can pose the questions. I think that is the best thing to do at this point in time. So let's just allow you to finish the presentation and then we'll take the questions. But it's a very valid question and a very valid. We've picked it up in the questions that we received, and we also have the same. So, dankie. Okay. Let's continue.
All right, so I hear that there's a lot of contention about conservation levies, so I think it'll be good to get those very clearly outlined from everyone. I think this is important. But in terms of how it would work, the idea is that it's split based on the development area. So in other words, if someone is developing a lot of land, that those future owners would contribute more than for a piece of land when there are few opportunities. And that's trying to be equitable. So in other words, if you're developing your full 8 hectares and there are now 160 opportunities on that land, each person would contribute a certain amount. And whether you on that area or a smaller area, you're going to, as a landowner, I think we worked out it would be about 70 Rand per month that you would pay as a conservation levy.
That's on developed land.
So this is not something that would apply now. So in other words, it wouldn't apply now. If you develop your land and get it approved for future development, right? And once those rights get realized, and now you have your 20 people on the 1 hectare, those 20 owners now would need to take on that cost for conservation levy. If you've got 160 people on your plot, obviously those people, there are more of them, they would contribute more towards the conservation of that open space in the precinct. But I'll get onto some examples and you can see specifically how it works just now. I don't think we'll go through this. This is just broadly how finances would flow. Okay, I'm going to go straight to the examples. Is that all right? So this is an example, so case number 1. In this case, you can see that there are 2 different color areas, right? There's 3 hectares with no offset required, so that would be a low sensitivity site. There might have been historic disturbance, there might already be some developments there. And the rest of the property has got high or moderate sensitivity and there's an offset required. And the assumption here in this example is that the landowner wants to develop the whole thing. Okay? So what that would mean is that there would be an offset obligation for the offset required areas. So 5 hectares times 4, which means a 20 hectare offset target. The offset costs are 160,000 Rand per hectare. That's the contribution that would need to be made. It would land up being 3.2 million for a property like this. All right? So then in terms of the conservation levies, you would see that that's based on the developable area, which is the full, in this case it's the full 8 hectares. So it would be 132,000 Rand per annum, not to be paid by the developer, but it would be paid by the 160 people that would own the areas once it's subdivided. Okay, so those are the housing unit opportunities. And for each housing unit opportunity, the conservation levy would then be 825 Rand per year. Okay. Where did the 160,000 per hectare came from? So that's a very good question. So what we had to do is we had to cost how much is it actually going to cost to secure an area of land and to manage it for a period of 30 years. That's what we had to cost. So what we did is we had a look at the areas outside Aalwyndal. We engaged with some of those landowners and we did costings to work out roughly what those costs would be. So we looked at a number of different properties, and over 30 years, the management costs really do stack up. And the best estimate we could make is that that's what the cost would be over a 30-year period.
Excuse me. Let me, I think, sorry for intervening here. Maar dis iets wat by my ook is, en miskien gee dit rigting net aan die vergadering. So I'm going to pose the question. If you are currently an owner and you don't have any intention of developing, you don't have any intention, you're not going to sell your property, or you're going, your children will inherit your property, you don't know what they're going to do with the property and so on, will they pay these levies?
I think that is to be decided, but I think So can I say the recommendation, that's what I wanted to say, the recommendation is that all of these come in once there's development approval. So in other words, if you as you are now and you don't do anything to your property, none of this applies, effectively. But if... So yes, so we can talk about the core area. And so the idea with the core area is that in the long term, that becomes something that the public can use in the long term. And each landowner would be given the opportunity around whether they are willing to make that land available to the core area. The benefits to the landowner, okay, just to say, we're assuming as part of the plan that if it's core area, it can never be developed. So assume that is the final line. And I'm not saying it is, but say you had 5 hectares of core area on your land, and that was the line. Basically, as it stands now, you would not be able to develop that, right? But there would be obligations. You still have to do alien plant control. You have to make sure that the burning is done appropriately. Okay. So what would happen though is that the idea is that the owners in the precinct, through their contributions, would take over that management responsibility for you. So, no, they would pay for all those activities to be done.
So that half that you must give away, voluntary, goes to who?
To everyone.
So the idea, I'm just saying the idea, was that there would be, that you would look to rezone it. So you would be asked to rezone it as a conservation servitude, all right? No, the idea, the municipality would look into funding that process. So the idea would be that it wouldn't cost you anything to do the rezoning.
I'm not talking about the funding.
Yeah.
I'm asking how are we going to be remunerated for that big 50% of our profit?
So at the moment, as I've said, let's assume it has no development potential. Okay? So essentially it's got no development opportunity, right? So the way it's working at the moment is that essentially the responsibility for managing that would be taken away from you. So you wouldn't have those costs, and there would be funding that would go to fencing your property appropriately. So I think what we're needing to understand is whether would that be acceptable or not. We haven't had a chance to ask those questions yet. And so I think this is where it's really important for landowners, especially who have core areas, to understand how they feel about that as a solution, and are there better ideas that you can come up with. But that's where we're sitting at the moment. So that's where we're at.
You know what, to be quite honest here, this has been made publicly available. Everybody and even developers saw this, and future buyers saw these. And this is devastating to the Aalwyndal market, to be quite honest. Yes. Exactly. They don't want to invest anymore now because this has been made public. Number one, before speaking to us. The second thing is this: if we look at this, and I think everybody agree here, this is only to advantage to the company that's going to manage this apparently and the municipality. Yes. We are all losers here. We are losers.
Excuse me, ons het
At this very moment, the residents of Mossel Bay does not realize, but we as residents pay this very moment almost 50 million per year to pay for the shuts, water and lights and electricity. So cut the electricity and water off and there's your money to pay for the lights.
Ek sien hierso sorry Douglas, let me kom ek gee net gou weer 'n bietjie rigting. Ek dink dis belangrike insette en kommentare. Baie dankie vir dit. Where are you in your presentation?
So what I would like to do is to show two other worked examples. I don't know if you feel that would be helpful. If it would be helpful, I can do that or not.
Sorry, I don't think so, because you know what? I think the big problem is that this whole biodiversity scheme or presentation is not according to law, first of all. The second thing is this was not discussed with anybody as it was supposed to be done prior to being put open for public.
Yes.
So the best thing is to do is to go and have a look at all the guys that said in this Aalwyndal precinct said that they do not agree to that. So that's step number one. We more than 70%. So we don't agree to that. I don't think anybody's going to give away half of their property for no reason.
And still pay.
And still pay.
Yes, no, I think that's a very valid comment. Thank you so much for that comment. Jy het jou hand nou al lank op, jy kan gerus gesels.
I think another problem that I see is, I've heard previously that they mentioned the homeowners association for this area. Now, for example, what happens if my plot gets developed and suddenly I've got 200 new residents on the plot, for example. And now, within this homeowners association, they've sort of got a monopoly voting in Aalwyndal. And now that gentleman has lost 50% of his plot. And now my owners decide, listen, why must the homeowners association contribute so much to his plot? Because he's not essentially part of the development. Can't we pay more in terms of the levies? Because essentially it's a negative for the development of that particular plot, but it's also for him a negative as well. So So I just see more conflict in terms of that within the group.
Well, I think the reason why we were suggesting a Masters Homeowners Association is that we understand that for most of the individual developments, there's likely to, certainly if there's a big development, there's likely to be a local homeowners association that's formed, right? And that would look after the interests of that particular land parcel. But there is a need, if one has a large conservation area, for someone or somebody, it doesn't have to be a master homeowners association, but somebody needs to receive funds to manage that and manage it effectively. And so there was a question early on around whether the municipality should do that. The challenges are is that the Municipal Finance Act, there really are major constraints to the municipality receiving funds, holding on to funds for a long time and then investing. And even just securing something like a security guard that's if it's immediately needed or fixing a fence, there are major constraints to doing that efficiently. So actually a private entity is much better at getting things done quickly. It's easier to do things quickly. And the idea was that that homeowners association would be representative of the community and would be acting in the interests of that community, but needing to meet the requirements of whatever plan was on the table.
And you think you're going to find such a person between the Aalwyndalers that's already up to here? You're not going to find that person, not really.
Goed, ek sien hier so is 2 hande. Ja.
Firstly, I would like to question the security fences. Are you creating a green corridor or are you creating an island of genetic property? Because they can be there. Because how is one creating for a corner that's not even an upper district? The lady mentioned a very important thing regarding the master hall and being endangered and having no statutory conservation within Morsel Bay. Morsel Bay has 8 vegetation types, ranging from critically endangered to endangered. None of these have any statutory conservation types. Why is it always a burden of the landowner to cover the cost of conservation when the urban fringe has been pushed so far over his land which we have deemed already as being sensitive? Where is the onus of the municipality to zone perfect green areas that doesn't affect the ratepayer on his land? Because trying to do we have now. We don't want to space 1 and 2, and they don't give us any statutory or non-statutory conservation measures.
Okay, let me answer the first question. So just in terms of the clear view fencing, the idea is that would go around the perimeter of these offset areas, but where it goes into adjacent land, ideally there would be gaps created to allow animals to go through. And there's been some thought around that. Obviously there's a bit of a security risk that would need to be managed, but the idea is that we don't want to have dogs and cats also easily just going into this area. It needs to be a conservation area. Otherwise, it's not worth managing like that. So essentially, we did look at a range of options. And I think if you've got any really great suggestions for us to consider, very happy to consider that. Just to say, it is something that is used very much in the city of Cape Town by their biodiversity management branch. It's kind of their standard fence that they go to. So it is being used very much in urban areas. It's very good from a security perspective as well, and it's long lasting. So can I just can I answer the second question first?
What education do these people put in charge of managing a conservation area actually have if it's coming out of a basis of homeowners?
Exactly.
Okay, ek dink dis baie goeie vraag daai. Dit begin net baie detail te raak en ek dink dis baie huiseienaars of Aalwyndal eienaars aan hierdie kant wat graag ook net 'n vraag wil vra. So you can respond to that one and then we're going over to this side and then I'm coming back to this side again.
Okay. So just in terms of the zoning of open space, I mean, I think what is really the most difficult thing about Aalwyndal, I think, in my perspective, is that the environmental information that was available 20 years ago suggested that actually a lot of development could happen, right? Then new information became available, and it actually has now changed things considerably. Can I just finish? So that has happened. Previously, like if this whole precinct was planned now, and you say, for example, the plots hadn't been subdivided, the layout would look very different, and the expectations would look very different. And I think normally what municipalities try to do with their development plans is they try to take the environmental sensitivities, and where they're sensitive, they try and build those open spaces into their plans. I think the reality here is that information around environmental sensitivity wasn't available at the time, and it's come up subsequent, and that's caused all this conflict. That suddenly, areas that seemed like they weren't, there was a comment, the least sensitive in Mossel Bay or something, but essentially there was information or lack of information around sensitivity, whereas as now studies started getting done, it was like, flip, this area is really sensitive, and actually we can't just let it go. And it's the authorities, when they were looking at those applications, that they were drawing the line and saying, actually, we can't have development that's like this, it's just transforming very sensitive habitat. So,
Conservation is fine. Conservation is fine. I think everybody supports that. It's the method how it's done that we have to pay for that, and the advantage for the municipality, because it's the levies, restricted on development, etc. That's the problem. The conservation is fine. I'm sure everybody is happy with. That's why we stay there. It's not the way it's done. This is enforced onto us, basically. It's not discussed with us. That's the big problem here. It has been discussed.
Skus, daarso baie dankie vir daai kommentaar. Daarso het jy 'n vraag. Jy kan gou vra en dan gaan ek vir
So that is a very good point, and I think we'd really like, if that's how you manage your property and you're wanting to keep managing it, it'd be very good to get that input. But the idea at this stage, and this is the long term, would be that all areas in Aalwyndal that are core areas, maybe over a 20, 30-year period, would come into conservation. What it would require, though, is that if you've got core area on your property, you would have to, if you wanted to be part of that, you would have to register your land or rezone it, and you would have a conservation servitude registered on it. At the moment, that's not being imposed, right? It's an option for you to do that, and it's a recommendation because it would be good for the. Sorry.
Okay, excellent.
You want to answer?
Okay. Kyk, ek is nou nie die kenner nie, maar die afleiding wat ek nou maak uit dit is as jy, soos wat jy nou tereg gesê het, jy daar gekoop en jy geniet dit soos wat dit is, en as jy dit so wil hou, dan kan jy dit so hou. Okay, is dit iets? So, op hierdie stadium mag hulle daar loop. Ja, op hierdie stadium. So dit hang nou af hoe soos dat ek verstaan hoe dit gaan ontwikkel. So I think the question is currently what she's trying to explain, and let me just trying to repeat it in English, is currently she's experiencing a certain life, a way of life with her animals going anywhere on the plot. So let's say the plan is accepted by authorities in future. I think the basic question is what will happen then. Is she still allowed to walk there and do her things on her plot, her property that she owns? With or without animals, with how many people, whatever, if she does not want to participate in this?
I think if you don't participate, there are no requirements. I think that's where it would sit. But I think if we want to talk about the aspiration, the long-term aspiration would be that the area would become part of a conservation area and be managed collectively for the community benefit. That would be the long-term aspiration. But again, this is individual landowners. So you can't be forced to do that or participate in that.
Can I just add something to that?
Okay, ek sien daarso die meneer daar heel agter u te hand en Jackie just want to add to 'n comment net voordat u vra gaan ek net gou vir haar 5 sekondes gee en dan sien ek u hand en ek sien weer daarso hand en dan kan ons na die kant toe weer gaan. Okay, Jackie.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, it's not a big thing to add, but just on your comment, it was something that we had to think about quite a lot. You know, people who enjoy Aalwyndal, and I really identify with that, wanting to have your own autonomy and freedom, and you're there because of the peace and quiet and the nature, and you can have your animals and basically be at peace. That is a wonderful way of life, and you know, we wouldn't want to disrupt that. However, because the area is identified for high density residential development, the reality is there are going to be plots around with earth moving machinery, building up 20 units per hectare. I don't know that the reality of this current way of life is going to be sustainable in the long term. So the peaceful walks with your animals in the core area, I'm not saying they're going to end immediately, but you may actually find that in a few years you think, oh, this is actually not really what I was here for in the first place. So at that point, you may then decide, right, I don't actually want to be in this area anymore, and that does happen. That happens with areas. Areas do develop. And well, I'm sure you would be able to sell. Someone will buy a property like that. But guys, this is Mossel Bay. It's one of the fastest growing areas in South Africa. It's not that this is going to entirely sterilize your property.
She meant that if your 80% of your property is core area, who's going to buy
Okay. Ek het vir daai meneer daar, kom ons gee net gou kans. Ek sien die hand. Ek het vir daai meneer daar die geleentheid gegee. Ek kan gerus praat.
Kan jullie enforceable word, of kan die community met die municipaliteit word, van julle is consultante wat deur die Weskaapse regering aangestel word. So julle ons wil weet wat ons
Wil jy iets sê?
gaan doen, dat hierdie nie word, soos wat nou gesê het, dis net vir 'n rukkie en gaan kan so die bly hier, en hulle genoem van, jy kan ek nie beskik my paard kry nie, ek kan nie my bokke loop nie, ek kan nie verantwoordelik is sal, ek kan hulle die springhoeke op die gronde, en dit kan gebeur, kyk goed, dis nie net een dier, daar's miskien nie vooraan voor, daar's een dier, en pak op die, en ek dink, die grootste ding is, ek dink ons het gat achterste door hier geraak, dan ons die publiek, met die Aalwyndal is die eerste grond geweest, en dan is het nog onwil te sê, ons het een slaar, wat sê, wat is ons doelwitte? Toe die 600 hektar opgedeel word in 300. Nou daar is 'n groot probleem, want ek wil weet, wat is ons regsposisie hierop? En dit is 'n regte antwoord word, want gaan hierdie op ons geënforce word? Nou, ons moet nie doekies omdraai nie. En as ek na Jaco reg geluister het, want ek dink, dis nie net kyk in die penalty, ek dink, daar, soos wat ek hoor, is daar nog 2-3 producties wat uit gang is, wat allemaal besef ons op waar, president wat ek in baie diversity gaan doen, om eventually van die grond af te kry. Maar ek dink, jy weet, baie serie, want ek kan nie na julle kyk nie, maar as ek kyk op die stad om te praat, en as ek kyk op die sit, of ook op die municipaliteit praat. Die municipaliteit is op die ouwe, die ene wat elke aansoek moet evalueer, en as die evaluasie vir 'n ou is dat hy moet bewen, dan moet ons besop om te sê, dit is nou gekonsolideer al die EIA's onder een vader, want dan lyk dit vir my kom die dryfveer van die Kaapse regering af. Ons wil hê, ons stadsraad, elke saak hanteer op sy eie manier.
Okay, baie dankie, dit is baie goed.
Jaco, hou hom net so.
Okay, julle sou gesien het, ek trippel hier rond.
Jaco, staan net stil.
Ja,
ekskuus.
Ek trippel altyd rond, ja, okay. So ek dink, ek was betrokke by die projek vandag 1 af. So ek, van die staatsraad se kant af weet ek, by verre die meeste, hoe ons beklei het, tussen Cape Nature en almal. Want op 'n stadium is daar eenvoudig gesê, luister jy, maar kom ons doen niks nie. Dit was op die tafel. Mosselbaai, daai geel plan wat ons vroeër gewys het, dit was ons plan. Dit was Mosselbaai munisipaliteit se plan, dit wat ons nog steeds sal verkies. Yes. Die realiteite is, daar's baie sensitiwiteit in Aalwyndal. Alright? As jy vandag as 'n ontwikkelaar jou aansoek doen, en ek dink baie van die goed is in daai preskrip wat jy het. As jy wil ontwikkel, moet jy deur 'n EIA-proses gaan en deur 'n staatsafdelingsproses. Right? En daar's nog ander ook, maar dis die twee hoof. So elke ou gaan doen sy navorsing, hy doen 'n studie. Binne in daai studie gaan jy meer detail hê as wat ons vandag het.
Jaco, ekskuus, jy moet net Engels oorslaan asseblief. Daar's 'n paar mense wat nie.
Sorry, I speak English. Right. So we will be available. Yeah, you must go through EIA and town planning process. You'll appoint your own consultant, and he will confirm whether the sensitivity on your plot is according to this or not. Right? That's the first thing I want to mention. So if you dispute the sensitivity, you can bring reports. Through that process, we will look at it. Why not? Because the more information we've got from town planning and from environmental affairs side, they want to make an informed decision. You as a property owner bought your property. Nobody will force you to do anything. I think that is the first thing I want to say, because we've been talking sort of around that the whole night, and that's not, the idea is not, and I think it was never the idea to force you into any plan. I think that we must understand from each other. That's not how Mossel Bay do business. I think that's not us. Listen, if you don't want to use this plan, we said it in that podcast, don't use it. You can do your own offset study if you need one. If you don't need one, there's some of the plots, there is no sensitivity, you don't need anything, you can go through the EIA process. If you can get through the EIA process without offsets, good for you. That is where we stand. From our side, we would like to have a holistic picture of Aalwyndal in the future. This is one that was compiled by the consultants. Whether it will play out like this, I cannot tell you. We've got good information tonight, and I think that is important for us, that you're not happy with the green area. We fought for about 8 months to 12 months regarding that. I started with the yellow plan. That's what I wanted. That's where we started. From Cape Nature side, they said nothing. So that's where the compromise comes in. We'll try and take this forward. There was a lot of comments, there was no consultation. The first discussion I had with someone regarding this plan, when we were in the initial stages, the consultants phoned Jackie and said, listen, I don't like this classification of my property, although we've had the facts on that specific properties. There was a study done by the consultant himself. So we decided to take this forward up to a stage where the science behind it is there, and then do the public participation. And that's where we are. So every comment that you guys gave gives us a good comment, which we like, the more comments we get. We must just remember, if you say I do not like offsets, it's not going to go away. I think that's the other reality. I've been in development my whole life, private sector and at the municipality. Your EIA must be approved before you can do anything. Your town planning application must be approved before you can do anything. And we're trying to find a way to help the owners to get there. That is what this is about. It's about nothing else. So, please send me your comments. admin@mosselbay.gov.za. That is the right way to do it, and then we can consider all the comments. But it's the sensitivity of your property and the problem of the sensitivity of Aalwyndal will not disappear. I think that's what I'm trying to say. Thank you.
Sorry, I must ask.
Good. I see your hand. You will definitely get your opportunity. Yes.
I want to come back to case one. What if the owner decides we only want to develop the 3 hectares?
If he only develops the 3 hectares, then there's no offset obligations, so there's no offset payment needed. As it stands now, though, there would still be a conservation levy on the developers there. So basically, the idea is that any future owner in Aalwyndal will contribute towards the conservation in the long term. So there would be that requirement would be there, but the offset requirement would not be there.
Okay, you raised your hand. You said you wanted to ask something.
I just want to jump back a question further. The whole thing goes about when I bought in and my title deed says it's a bona fide farm. It was then changed to residential. Who changed it?
Okay. Jaco, you want to respond to that one?
And why?
Okay, so it was never changed to residential. The earth number, the farm number became an earth number. That's what happened. It happened 2 years back. The issue office just called us and said, here's the list of new numbers. It was an initiative driven by them. It's got nothing to do with your land use rights. It's got nothing to do with your value. If you go and develop in Gauteng, the only way to create an earth number is by township establishment. In the Western Cape, it doesn't work like that. We've got for Council Plaas, for instance. Before this happened, all the houses there had farm numbers. Now they've got earth numbers. So they tried to do that. So that is what actually happened.
Okay, so then since then my rates has increased as well.
It's not about the rates. The rates is actually valued on the zoning, first of all, and then your use. That's what you use. That's what they use. What they use is resales. There's a couple of plots in Aalwyndal which actually were sold for a lot of money to developers. And that had an impact on the valuation that is created in that area.
Okay, so it's still bona fide farming on my deed. Yeah. So can I farm on it?
It's not correct. It is in your deed. It is in your deed, I know. Yeah. That is clauses. If you look at a lot of title deeds, that farm was actually either next to the highway or next to a provincial road. Then Act 21 of 40 applied, and that's the conditions that goes with that. So that old farm, because it touched the provincial road, that was transferred to all the properties. So it is in a title deed, I acknowledge that. But the zoning, in terms of
I can't farm.
In terms of your zoning, no.
eenhede per hektaar opsit. En jy verkoop dit vir R50.000 per eenheid. Dan maak jy net R25 miljoen per hektaar. So my plot is in die mark vir daai bedrag. Daar's 25 miljoen per hektaar.
Daar's hy baie.
Enigiemand wat belangstel?
Okay. Ek sien hy, ek sien jou hand.
Terugkom daarna, wat die hele ding word gedryf om te sê hoe sensitief is Aalwyndal. Nou, as dit so sensitiewe area is, dan is jou perde, jou skape, jou hoenders is besig om die natuur op te donder. Ja. Maar as jy nie ontwikkel nie, dan donder dit nie op. Wie het hierdie ding, en ek wil dit vir jou baie duidelik mooi vra, na die negatiewe kant toe begin dryf vir die Aalwyndalers. Want Jaco wat daar sit, is een wat het positief gedryf het, of probeer dryf het. Wie, en dit vra ek amptelik, volgens artikel 32 van die grondwet, wie het hierdie ding so begin dryf? Jy hoef nie vir my te sê hoekom nie, want ons sal dit in al die dokumentasie moet sien. Dis onmoontlik dat dit so, daar's hoeveel hyper ongelooflik verskriklik sensitief gebruik die woorde. Maar dis fine. Dis aan mekaar, dit lys die hele tyd. Dis fine. As Anton se perde sy grond stikkend raak, as haar perde en haar donkies en haar hoenders of my honde my alles doodmaak. Of as ek my grond heeltemal ontwikkel, dan vat ek die hele natuur weg. Reg oorkant my is daar letterlik nie 1 vierkante millimeter op daai stuk grond meer oor nie. Niks, zero. Nou wat word van daai sensitiwiteit daarvan? En dis 'n retoriese vraag. Jy gaan my nie antwoord nie. Want dis 'n feit, ons weet dit almal. My vraag is, ek wil 'n antwoord hê. En ek wil 'n antwoord hê en die Aalwyndalers wat almal saamstem. Ons aansit om te sê volgens hulle, volgens artikel 32 soek ons alle. En die wet sê baie duidelik. Skriftelik, audio, visueel, enigiets. Waar kom hierdie besluite vandaan om hierdie ding so negatief te begin dryf?
Okay. Kyk, die Jaco het geantwoord, so in terme van die munisipaliteit se bydrae is dit wat Jaco vanaand vir jou geantwoord het. So dit is jou antwoord in terme van dit. Ek dink wat so ek dink dis wat Jaco nou net gesê het, wat dan gaan gebeur. Ja.
Want hier staan 660 units hier, so jou klop al het jy nog ontwikkel nie. Jammer vir jou, dis absoluut gebeur.
Ek dink dit is wat Jaco probeer sê, nou wat nou nie kan gebeur nie, wat ons nie kan afdwing nie. So I think there's a conversation happening there, but there's lots of questions. So Hein, let's ask on this side again. Any hands? Ek dink ek gaan nie met jou nou 'n debat voer nie, Hein. Ek dink hier's baie ander mense wat 'n vraag wil vra. Ek het jou geantwoord.
Artikel 32 sê dat die munisipaliteit moet volgens die grondwet alle inligting wat hulle hou wat enigstens verband het met jou saak, dis ons saak hier nie, aan jou bekend maak en vir jou gee. Dan vra ek weer, kan ons dit kry asseblief?
Ja, jy kan dit kry.
Wanneer, Karel?
Wanneer jy vanaand word hy uitgesaai byvoorbeeld. So jy kry dit al vanaand reeds en wat ook al jy nog wil hê, kan ons vir jou beskikbaar stel. Kom ons gaan net oor na die kant toe. Is hier so enige vrae? Yes. Sorry, there's a question.
Wanneer en waar het hierdie ding ontstaan? Hoekom word ek doodgepraat want jy kan nie of wil my nie antwoord nie? En dit bekommer my.
Jy het 'n vraag hierso. U wil bylas?
Ja, ek wil graag bylas. Bladsy 37. Ek gaan nie die hele ding lees nie, maar dit sê daar
ek verlaat die vergadering en in terme van artikel 32 en namens Aalwyndal se mense sal ek dan vir jou persoonlik verantwoordelik hou en dagvaard.
Hein, wag net so 'n bietjie.
Dis die realiteit van wat hier aangaan. Hierdie mense sit almal met miljoene rande op die spel hier. Jy, Karel, weet net so goed soos ek. Ek hoef nie in te wees nie, my goeders is deur. Ek beklei vir hierdie mense nie vir myself nie.
Dankie, Hein.
Ek wil net gou vir jou ietsie uitlees uit hulle dokumente uit. Okay, bladsy 37 staan daar, there may however be a need for external funding support to help establish the conservation banking structure for this project, particularly given that this model is largely untested in South Africa context. En dan op bladsy 30. Once the Aalwyndal Strategic Biodiversity Offset Framework Plan is finalized, have the DEA and DP Head of Department sign off on this as a provincial strategy and upload this to the DFFE online screening tool. So gaan dit dan deur die hele Weskaap moet aanvaar word, want dit is 'n model wat voorgelê word.
Yeah, no, that's a very good question, which I don't know. Your comments on that one?
So just to answer first about the idea of the offset scheme being untested, there was something around that you mentioned. That was the offset banking scheme, and that applies to the offset sites outside of Aalwyndal. So it's
Okay, let me read the whole paragraph. The BOCP will need to have a certain amount of financing permitted before they can engage with landowners further. It is also understood that some of the work may need to be done at risk, which could result in delay in the biodiversity credits being generated. Once established, the funding model assumes that the credit provider would extract an annual administration fee to cover coordination, oversight and financial management services. So the would be
no, this is just about the off-site areas. If you look in the report, you'll see it specifically under the off-site areas. It doesn't that specific section does not relate to the on-site conservation areas in Aalwyndal.
Yes, but it won't be a role model.
It's about the conservation banking structure.
So the structures are different for what happens outside versus what happens inside.
It's still offset.
Yes, but there are different ways to do it. Yeah, there are different ways to do it. And I'm very happy to show you the detail later.
Project, the homeowners association, the master homeowners association will run this.
So you'll see that the Master Homeowners Association would be, or has been earmarked as the primary source of funding, because they would collect the funds. But in terms of the outside areas, the idea is that there would be a biodiversity banking service provider. It could be a non-profit organization or similar that would be responsible for engaging with those landowners and entering into agreements with those landowners to conserve areas outside of Aalwyndal. So that's where the key difference lies.
It's all about, let's say, the preparation of management plans.
Yes, so management plans is different to like an offset agreement. There are a lot of, there are a number of different agreements and plans that need to be developed. But for every offset site, it needs a management plan that says this is what's going to happen in this area and how that particular area will be managed.
Sorry, yes, sir.
Model be applied in the whole Western Cape. That's my question.
So just to say, the biodiversity offset space is relatively new in South Africa. It's been around for about 10 or 15 years, whereas in the States it's been there for like 60 years. Right, so we are learning. This idea of a strategic offset plan, we've got a wetland offset plan in Durban, which is working well. There's another 2 in the Western Cape that are off the ground. So the department is trying to move towards more strategic offsets and trying to figure out how to do that well, rather than asking individual landowners to do their own little plans.
So we are the guinea pigs to put it through and as a model for the whole Western Cape.
Now, I think I wouldn't say that in some ways you are guinea pigs, in that you're one of the first to try and look at trying to do things strategically. I think the alternative, as Jaco has presented, is you each do it case by case. And that's very costly and it's very difficult.
We lose anyway more than we lose with the EIA.
So I think the idea, and going back to the idea, and if it's not working, then we need to know how to improve it, right? But the idea was to try and find a way to allow development to happen in a sustainable way that tries to find a balance between environment and development. And I think we've done our best to put a first proposal on the table.
Sorry, I've got to ask this. I've been trying to sell my property, and due to the fact that this is only a proof, a draft, and the way it's been marked out on my property, the investors have come back to me and said, no, sorry,
Not interested.
can't buy it.
Yeah.
Because they know of the plan, they've seen it.
Cause more destruction. Sorry, can I ask you a personal question? Do you have a financial investment in this? And do you have a government contract?
So just to say, we were appointed by essentially the Western Cape government to assist the municipality in developing this plan. Okay?
So you're outside contractor?
I'm based in KZN. Okay, so I've come here from KwaZulu-Natal. Yeah, I've got no vested interests here.
Okay, sorry. Okay, I'm intervening because I see a lot of hands and the hands is up for quite some time. Yes. Gaan hulle?
Op sy draad is aan.
Ek was nog een keer teen om wat ons gewees nie, maar die van hand af is ek daar teen. Ja. Dit wil sê daar's is my erf daar wat daai en hulle die ander ouens wil ontwikkel langs my, dan kom hy so dan gaan hy so reguit so om my erf gaan.
Okay. So the question is, he doesn't want to give his property for any development, anything to this project whatsoever. What will happen? Will he be excluded, fence-wise, in terms of a fence, physically?
Okay, I can answer that. All right, so we obviously also consider these type of scenarios where, landowner just says flat, I'm not interested, I want out of this thing. And I mean, I think Donnie will know from DECP, in all of these conversations that we've had, we've considered, okay, well, what makes the core area a viable conservation area? And what makes it qualify as an area that could eventually be rezoned as a protected area? Because there's criteria that need to be met for that. And if you read through Report 3, you'll see the types of management that we need to apply to the core area for it to be considered an acceptable on-site offset area. Cape Nature and DECP were very adamant that for it to qualify as an on-site offset area, to qualify, it would need to be managed for conservation. That means if we've identified areas and after all of this revision we still say, oh no, sorry sir, I don't know exactly where your plot is or what's on it. Maybe there was something very sensitive like a population of plants there, I'm not sure what's there. If that now, person A says, right, I don't want to be in, so we're going to go around him. Then that person says, I'm not interested in this plan, maybe take them out. We're going to end up undermining this core area entirely, and it will no longer be viable. In that case, the whole avoidance and minimization effort for that goes. Pardon?
What you're telling us now, not what Jaco is saying.
Well, ultimately, though, the viability of the core area. Yeah. Look, if you don't want to participate immediately, that's fine. But obviously. Yeah. Look, the alternative, I think what's important to understand is if we had to toss the core area in the bin, because everyone says we hate the core area, we don't want it, we don't want this conservation, we don't want the stuff that comes with it, and we want to go on and do our own thing. I think it's important to understand, well, where does that leave us? And I think that.
And then we will decide if we're going to be in, and the developers must just go outside Aalwyndal. They leave Aalwyndal out.
Yeah, because this is actually almost sounding like there's a conflict between the development, pro-development sector, and then the sector who would like Aalwyndal to remain exactly for the effect of property values.
There's a majority.
You put out to move what we have to pay for. You want us to pay for. They can develop it, let they develop on that piece of land. And leave Aalwyndal out.
Okay, well, I think it might be quite useful to just consider this scenario if we do toss out the core area. So if we say, okay, we're going to go with the yellow plan. All right, so we go with the yellow plan. Thirdly, and I might just ask Don, do you think you might be able to just explain what the consequences of that might be? Sorry to put you on the spot, but yeah. Okay, I'm going to... Yes?
What you show there is why you show that. When you stand and look, my clock is going down like that. You can stand with the bottom, there, you cannot see the bottom. Yeah. And you cannot see, but you're making the area for conservation.
Yeah.
And there's nothing there.
Well, that's fine. I mean, this is why we're having a public participation. If you're saying that you believe this is actually a very low sensitivity, then highlight your earth to us and say, I completely disagree with your SEI findings, and maybe we need to come and ground truth further. If you allow us access, we can come and have a look. But
every night, the Easter party is coming, they keep all the plants.
really? Okay.
Every night.
Yeah. The most sensitive.
The most sensitive all the.
But I thought you were a nature lover.
Okay, there was a suggestion here that Dani from Deadby just give us an explanation. In terms of a yellow map of Jacob, a scenario there that the municipality initially preferred and maybe still prefer. That Dani just give us a scenario from Deadby in terms of the applications that they received, some of the applications or maybe all the applications in terms of that plan. Maybe what happened, or Dani, maybe you've got something more to say. Please, the floor is yours.
Dani, also please explain why you said the least sensitive area.
Staan nie daar so. Ja.
Sorry, introduce yourself.
Yes, I'll do that. Thank you. I'm Dani Swanepoel. I'm an official civil servant working for provincial government in the Department of Environmental Affairs and Development Planning in the office in George. We're responsible for considering or reviewing environmental impact assessments. So you've heard tonight that if you want to develop your property, it's quite likely that you will have to obtain environmental authorization for that. And in order to do that, you will have to go through an EIA process. So the EIA process involves many things, amongst others, public participation, a number of specialist studies those are all regulated in protocols and regulations. So we have very little flexibility about what is required. It's all written up in law. I can explain you the detail if you're interested. So what happens is when we receive the reports and we look at that and the specialist identifies sensitivities like you've heard tonight, the SEI, areas of high and medium and low sensitivity. We have to consider that in the context of the legislation and the published guidelines. One of those guidelines is the National Biodiversity Offset Guideline that was presented in 2023. And that guideline basically says that if the site ecological sensitivity is very high, then that area cannot be offset and it cannot be developed. So we have no choice but to refuse your development if the entire development falls into that sensitivity class. If the site is high or medium sensitivity, and you've gone through the mitigation hierarchy, so you've done everything you could to avoid and minimize the impact, and you still land up with a high or medium residual impact, then the requirement is that you must do an offset, a biodiversity offset, which means you can get authorization to transform that high or medium sensitive site, but in turn, in exchange for that, you have to obtain another piece of property with similar biodiversity, which will be protected in posterity. And that will be your responsibility as a developer to do that. And the ratios are also included in the guideline. It goes up to 1 in 30. So if you want to develop 1 hectare of high or medium sensitivity area and you qualify for a biodiversity offset, you may be required, and that depends on biodiversity offset study that will have to be done by a specialist like we have here tonight. And you may be required to obtain an area of 30 hectares or 10 hectares for each 1 hectare that you want to develop. That will be for the developer's cost. So either buy it or into some other agreement with the landowner to say that he will allow you to use that as a biodiversity offset. then you will have to proclaim that area as protected area in terms of the National Protected Areas Act. There is a process attached to that. You won't be able to do that unless you have a management plan, a protected area management plan. So somebody will have to develop that management plan. That management plan will have to cost, the cost of implementing that plan over a period of 30 years. And the developer will be responsible for paying that amount to the entity that will manage that offset area. That is what we have at the moment. So if you're not, the whole idea with this strategic biodiversity offset strategy is to make it easier for developers to develop, to do some of the legwork up front. I hear you. If we don't go that way, that was the question, if we go with a yellow plan with a thin sliver of open space along the steep slopes that we can't develop anyway, two things about it. One is you didn't apply the biodiversity mitigation hierarchy. Secondly, you will have to go through the EIA process. And quite likely, with the information we have at the moment, you will be required to do a biodiversity offset on your own. And the developer will have to pay for all of that. The cost will quite likely be much more than what is expected now with the strategy. That's a question. There was another question earlier on, will that now apply for the whole of the province? We have Saldanha biodiversity offset strategy that has been published already, accepted by the Minister. That's the only other one in the Western Cape province that I'm aware of where such a strategy has been accepted by our department.
Donnie, can we just find out here tonight, are there any developers here, and what would their opinion be about this suggestion of yours? Any developers here?
You want to take that out?
Okay.
Like that of ons dalk wat jy sien in die gesig staan.
Ekskuus tog?
Like that of ons wat jy sien in die gesig staan.
Expropriation.
Without compensation.
Nee.
Want soos hierdie ding gedryf word, lyk dit of dit is die rigting wat ons gaan.
Nee, ek kan vir u sê dit is
Donnie, sorry, net gou.
The question is it expropriation basically? And the answer is no, it's not. It was never the intention to do that. The intention was to make it easier for developers to do the development. If we don't go this way, then each individual developer, applicant, will have to go through that process on his own. And the outcome of that may quite likely be that the offset areas are all over the place and doesn't make sense from a holistic point of view. There won't be a proper corridor from a conservation point of view. So you will probably have small pieces of natural vegetation within Aalwyndal surrounded by development, and that is just a recipe for conflict, really.
Tony, if we look at the layout of this, we know it's not approved, right? The layout of the green core zone. Yeah. But if we look at some of the properties that's going to lose 80% of their plot, right? It's going to be a green core area. That means they're going to lose that ground. They have to pay to have their conservation area based on this model now, right? So 80% of their property is lost. That's core area now. So they've got 20% remaining. Is that not part of ontaining? Just in a clever, sleek way? Because that's exactly what it is. If we look at it.
Yeah, so if you don't, if this goes nowhere, and you have a property with 80% core area and 20% area that you can develop without an offset. If you want to develop that site, you will probably have to go through an EIA process.
No, I understand that, but that's not the EI, it doesn't make a difference.
The point I want to make is the outcome of that EI process is quite likely to say that you're allowed to develop your 20%, 80% can't be developed because that's sensitive.
Okay, but
that is not expropriation.
No, you don't answer. My vraag is, as daai plan deurgaan soos wat hy daar is, en 80% van die plot se eiendom word verloor, wat 'n core area gedeklereer word. Plus, dan moet jy nog jou levy daar betaal. Dan is dit onteiening, want hoekom betaal die munisipaliteit jou nie uit vir daai 80% van jou plot?
Presies.
Hulle wil dit hê, en ons moet betaal daarop. Ek dink nie enigiemand het 'n probleem hierso as die munisipaliteit of die staat daai 80% gaan uitbetaal aan die mense wat die reg wat hulle regverdige bedrag verspied. Dit is waaroor dit gaan. Dit gaan nie oor die groen stukkies hierso en stukkies daar nie. Dit gaan oor hoe dit gedoen beplan word volgens die ding. Want as jy 'n stuk grond het, as jy kyk na Maligpaag, allerlei plekke reg rondom die Kreerwiltuin, om damme en so goed, en die staat die mense uitbetaal, markverwaarde per hektaar van daai grond. Hoekom hier word dit heeltemal op 'n nuwe manier gedoen? Jy spaar jy word 'n core area en jy betaal, jy moet betaal daarvoor. So hulle wil grond gryp en ons moet daarvoor betaal.
Ja, ek dink nie dit is
wat toestemming kry, die stadsraad en weer al die prosesse gaan het, omdat hulle gewoon plat gestoot is, dan begin hulle vir ons sê, maar ons bly in die groen gebiede. Ons wil nie ontwikkeling nou hê.
Ja, ek hoor en ek
Die stadsraad wat ook ontwikkeling doen en ander developers, laat ons op 'n ander plek gaan beweeg.
Ek hoor wat Jaco net gesê, baie infrastruktuur is al reeds daar en daar is goed gedoen. Ja? Maar hoekom my voorstel aan Aalwyndal? Hoeveel van die Aalwyndalers wil ontwikkel kom ons stem en dan beskal ons maar by ons en dan sê ons altyd dan moet hulle maar in 'n ander plek sit.
Ek wil ek wil wat Jackie vroeër gesê oor dit klink vir my as ek luister wat jy sê, party mense wil glad nie ontwikkeling hê nie.
Presies, meerderheid van ons wil nie ontwikkel.
En party wil nie ontwikkeling.
Dit is andersom.
Meeste wil ontwikkel. So daar is party wat wil ontwikkel en party wat nie wil ontwikkel nie.
Elkeen se reg om self te besluit.
Dit is elkeen se reg om self te besluit en elkeen gaan moet aansoek doen vir sy ontwikkelingsregte, wat gaan beteken dat jou buurman mag dalk langs jou ontwikkel en jy gaan nie ontwikkel.
Maar die vraag, ja, maar as jy wil ontwikkel, dan vat hulle 80% van jou plot wat onteien word.
Ek dink nie ek praat uit hoe ek dit verstaan. Dit is 'n voorstel op die tafel, dit is vir my ook redelik kompleks. Ja. Ek is maar ek dink die bedoeling hierso is dat die ontwikkelaar levy betaal of nie levy nie, afsetbedrag betaal sodat in plaas daarvan dat die munisipaliteit nou die grond onteien by jou en dit in oop ruimte sit. Want die munisipaliteit het nie geld daarvoor nie, dan gaan dit nie doen. Dat die ontwikkelaars daarvoor betaal. As ons op 'n manier kan dink hoe ons dit kan regkry, en dis die bedoeling, dat die ontwikkelaars die regte kry op 'n stuk grond wat gewoonlik nie sou kon ontwikkel nie, want dit is hoogsensitief. In ruil daarvoor gee hulle 'n bedrag of 'n stuk grond. Dit kan wees binne Aalwyndal en dis die bedoeling, eerste plek binne Aalwyndal en dan buite. Ons moet 'n manier vind om dit te maak werk.
Nee, ek verstaan daai konsep. Die probleem Die probleem is die konsep. Kom ons praat verder oor die ontwikkelaar wat hy moet betaal. Ek verstaan daai konsep. My punt is, hier's mense wat tot 80% van hulle plotte gaan verloor as hy wil ontwikkel. Dit is my konsep wat ek van praat nou. En ja, Ruiterbos is nog ander ding. Ons kom nou by dinge sal dit nou Heinzer bespreek. Maar daai 80% van daai plot wat nou uitgegee word as 'n core area. Nou die verkoper van daai plot kan nou net 20% teoreties verkoop van sy plot. Want die ontwikkelaar wat wil ontwikkel, waar hy plot wou koop wat 10 hektar was,
koop nou net 2 hektaar oor. Want 7 hektaar is nou 'n core area, waarvoor hy moet 'n levy betaal, die ontwikkelaar nou, maar die eienaar verloor 80 of 70% van daai plot se waarde. Dit is waar ek op neerkom, is wie skoor hierso? Wie is die mense wat die meeste wen hierso? Is die munisipaliteit wat hier wen. En die res is almal wat verloor hierso op hierdie konsep wat nou voorgelê wil word. En ons staan dit teen, van my kant af staan ons dit teen.
Ja, ek wil net ek hoor dit en ek verstaan dit heeltemal en ek hoor. Die uitdaging is dat as dit nie gebeur, as die afsetstrategie nie gaan voortgaan nie, gaan ontwikkelaars in elk geval, ons het 'n paar aansoeke al op die aan die gang. As daar geen rede is om die ontwikkeling te weier, met ander woorde, daar is nie sensitiewe plante gegroei, geen kwessies nie. Al die kwessies is geminimiseer, avoid en al daai goeders. Dan gaan ons dit waarskynlik moet goedkeur want dit is in lyn met die munisipaliteit se plan, se SDF.
Yes.
Dan gaan ontwikkeling in elk geval gebeur in Aalwyndal. Die mense wat dit nie wil hê nie,
precies.
Ek is jammer om die spele te breek, maar sedert 2017 toe daai plan of voor dit toe daai plan goedgekeur is dit cool deur die kerk basis. Wat ons nou doen is om te sê maar hoorie, dit gaan ongeordend gebeur, daar gaan ontwikkeling gebeur en daar gaan oop ruimtetjies kom, die gaan nie gekonnekteer wees nie. Dit gaan nie sinvol wees nie. Kom ons dink aan 'n plan om dit sinvol te maak, om ontwikkeling sinvol te maak, om die oop ruimte wat ons gaan wil bou, wat tot 'n voordeel gaan wees vir mense wat daar gaan bly.
Maar die eienaars die grond verloor,
as ons dit kan regkry, dis die bedoeling dan.
Exactly. Betaal die mense uit, dan sal daar nie probleme wees nie.
As ek nie van die tyd dat hulle betaal daarvoor. As ek teruggaan na die 2018, was daar al reeds gepraat van offset. Met die ding het julle al klaar na eienaars toe gegaan vir offset, is ek reg? Daar is al klaar met die T1 en T2, het julle klaar met offset potensiële eienaars gepraat, nie reg nie?
Sorry, Jaco, let's just, there's a question with the previous offset study, that there were conversations with some of the property owners, and you want to confirm that with
but
Jaco.
no, but also
It's
with
included
this,
in this one.
In this one, you already contacted potential tier 1 and tier 2 offset, offsite, plase, eiendomme, landowners to help with the conservation as an offset. So why not just go to those and use that for the people that actually want to develop in Aalwyndal?
Okay, I think that's a very fair question, and after that I see your hand. You've been raising your hand for a long time, so I'm going to respect that. Can I just ask Jaco to respond, and then we're going to give you an opportunity.
Okay, so the issue is listen, everybody, to conserve in Aalwyndal is actually very difficult, right? So that's why you had the fences and all of it. So it's actually much easier to conserve outside of Aalwyndal.
Yeah.
The problem is if we do that, then the land in Aalwyndal will not be, there will be no contribution from the developers or the owners who lose land which is sensitive. I don't know whether you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Because if you do offsets in Aalwyndal, there's still value from a developer or whoever to buy that land that cannot be developed for offsets. There's value in it. As soon as you go outside, there's no.
It's worthless.
Dis worthless grond daar, Jaco.
Ja, ek dink dis 'n goeie baie goeie insig daai die model moet daar kyk. Ek stem heeltemal saam met u daarso. Jy kan gerus jou vraag vra.
Jackie, forward up conversation with you about this. Just out of the conservation point of view, there's something that doesn't really make sense. So these 4 areas can be bought up and developed at a price, correct?
4 areas?
The core areas?
No.
Not. So it's only high impact areas that can. So high impact areas can. Not core areas.
High SEI and medium SEI outside of the core area, yes, you can develop there, but you must pay an offset contribution.
Okay, and tell me, are there any of these core areas that will not be linked if those high impact areas are developed eventually?
No, everything is connected, except for the strange box next to the airfield, but that's protecting plants. Yeah. Okay.
Goed, daar was 'n vraag die kant gewees. Yes. Ja, jy kan gerus praat.
Sorry, so you say there's high value on conservation area on the core area. Why does the owner of that property not see that value in their pocket for incentive to actually give it as conservation area? Then this whole thing would be mitigated. Why is it that if someone even donates their area for conservation, then they still have to pay levies on the property that they have that is exponential, that they most likely cannot afford?
Yes.
It's a negative incentive to conserve.
Yes.
You're supposed to be working
100%
with a incentive-based management plan here to actually have people want to conserve nature, have the corridors created, and then also at least get something in return for it that is a give and take. That is owners giving up their property, which they don't really want to do, but at least they don't have to pay for the the levies. They don't have to pay that, and that way they can keep their property and do what they want on it.
Yes, yes.
I think that's a very good point, and I think a number of people have raised that tonight. And so I think that is another model. Okay, but what it would require, just to be clear, is that if you now compensate the landowner as well for that land, the cost of then managing that on-site area would increase, right? Because at the moment the costs are just based on fencing, which is a major cost, the cost of having manager, security, all those things, but it doesn't at this stage include the cost for purchasing land. So if you now pay for land, it does increase the cost, and someone has to pay for that. So that's the challenge. It's like, how do you then...
We already paid. We have to pay for it. Yeah.
We already paid for it. Why do we now have to pay again? It is our land. Nobody else is
what I'm saying is that
who's making money out of it?
Someone who's paying for the offsets, right? So if we went with this model, now there's a new developer and he has an offset obligation, okay? And now instead of maybe contributing more outside, we're now going to increase the cost inside because now he has to pay for that. Not you, the developer has to pay, right? So it could be the guy that's got 8 hectares of land with no offset obligation. Now he has to pay for the offset. But if we have to conserve those areas on site and pay for them, the cost goes up. So that's the question is who pays for that? It's already expensive.
Okay, so now we have to pay. It's an unnecessary.
Yeah, so we have to pay for it.
We've already paid for it. We're already paying for it. We've already paid for it. Now we have to pay
again. Offset obligation only comes into effect when someone develops land.
Okay,
right? So it would be future developers would have to
pay. And then trying to sell the land, you have to give away half of your land, 80%, 2%, 5%.
What I'm hearing you saying as an alternative is that some of those areas that are of conservation value, let's try and find a way of that do actually have real value to the landowners, rather than essentially what is no value.
Let the municipality pay for the land, then it's got value for us. Then we can get rid of it. No problem.
Conserve it,
yeah, then you can conserve it. Ja, dat die greenies daarvoor betaal.
Ek wil net sy eerste. Hy kom maar bel. Okay, my eerste vraag. I just want to ask a question.
Ons kan
nee, ek dink iemand moet dit stop.
We're only going to less than 50% of the properties and not going to the areas down in the green areas and saying that you saw a mole, was it binoculars or was it on a desktop? So I don't, my perspective about that is green area is a green area made where horses have been walking there, eating the grass and everything. So I don't agree with it by diversity, by no means, because 50%, more than 50% of the area was not evaluated. Point number one. Point number two is there were 5 OTPs going through that were shot down based on this. That is what we heard. 5 OTPs by different areas of buyers that will be shot down because of this. So the question is, then let's rather go for the ETAs. Let the developers go to the ETA, we go to the resource fencing plan, and let's go away from this because this is not going to work.
That's good. Thank you.
Ek wil net graag weet, ons is almal verplig om brandpaaie te maak vir ons klein jongens. Hoeveel van daai kleintjies wat hulle toe bekommerd oor is, het ons nie al reeds vrek gemaak met die brandpaaie?
Exactly.
Oh, nee.
Exactly.
En die sypaadjies. En die sypaadjies, ja.
Maar daai plantjies groei nie daar nie. Hulle weet aan te groei. Daai plantjies.
Die tweede vraag wat ek ook vra is, as die meneer vir ons gesê het, ons kan die wat nie wil ontwikkel, die kan op hulle klein jongens bly soos hulle wil, soos in die verlede, ons het dit 30 jaar terug gekoop. Ek was die derde ou wat gekoop het die tyd toe hulle ontwikkel het daar. Hoekom mag ons nie vir ons weer nog store opsit nie?
Ja.
Want van ons voertuie staan
Exactly.
maar die munisipaliteit weier ons.
Exactly.
I think, as ek jou eerste vraag verkeerd het, help my net reg. I think it relates to Jackie to the fire break issue.
And pavement.
The gentleman said that they were in terms of regulations forced to make fire breaks, and he's concerned about did that not actually affect the vegetation and biodiversity and so on their plots, and that you take that into consideration. Het ek min of meer herhaal wat jy
Ja, en die sypaadjies.
Die sypaadjies wat die munisipaliteit self sny.
Yes, we actually have exactly taken all of that into account. If I can just quickly race back to that example that I gave you. Fire breaks, servitudes, we mark them all as either low or very low. This thing here is a fire break. So yeah, we did take that into account. It's a repeated disturbance, so it can't be seen as a high sensitivity area.
Wanneer die ander vraag sê antwoord hê van hoekom mag ons nie meer vir ons stoor opsit wat ons goed wat buite staan om oproes kan binne
is dit stoor? Stoor. Nou kom wil jy sê
manipulasie
en die plan nou goedkeur nie.
Ander blykbaar 150 vierkante meter stoor.
Wat van waar af kom? Waar kom daai
as ek te klein is van my goed, hoekom mag ek nie 'n groter een bou nie?
Dis maar in die skema, dan kan jy 'n afwyking aansoek doen.
Hulle wil huise bou wel.
Miskien kan ons net daai vraag hanteer.
Hulle wil besluit
Kyk,
ons kan doen.
Dis 'n interessante vraag. Ek dink die realiteit is nêrens anders in Mosselbaai kan jy 'n Bressie 150 vierkante stoor bou. Dit word toegelaat in Aalwyndal. Jy kan 'n huis hê met jou garages, jy kan nog 'n huis hê met jou garages en jy kan 150 meter stoor hê. So jy moet baie goed hê om alles vol te maak.
Ons het baie goed.
I just replied to that. I live opposite Claudia a long time. We put up a whole lot of stores there. About 2/3 of the property is stores. I complained, and the municipality sent me a letter back and said that's within the understanding file of the Aalwyndal it's allowed. I have a letter to that effect.
There was one approval a long time ago, there at the end of Aalwyndal, and those stores were approved via an application process. It wasn't just allowed. And then there was two other storage units applications that was approved.
That's not true. They put up the stores illegally and applied subsequently for permission. A letter was sent round to the owners. I complained, and I think a letter from you came back saying it's in the allowable buildings for Aalwyndal. And about 2/3 of his property is built.
Ja.
Goed, ek sien jou hand, daar was net gou die meneer daar en dan weer terug na jou. Ja, van ons so intoe.
Ek kan hierdie kans gee die ander.
Plan that you guys have done with all the corridors that are looking with the green spaces in the future. On plan it looks good. I understand that everything flows and all the sensitive areas connect, but in reality South Africa and in Mossel Bay, when I look at just the surrounding suburbs, that is, I moved to Sierra Park and I stayed there last year for a year, and all the syndicates moved in those green areas. And just below, I sent pictures to Yaku as well. There's green spaces where you can go and get the TV. I think there's about 20 screens lying right with your houses. So much so that the security cannot control the green areas.
Exactly.
They now are forming a partnership with Afriforum to get money in to buy drones with with infrared stuff in it, just to be able to control the area. How are we going to control 300 hectares? I think if the development here we've already got all the stands, and it's sort of getting to a state. If the development happens naturally, we're going to have rather estates that are developed instead of trying to develop the entire and put regulations on the entire Aalwyndal at once, where you're going to have a bunch of owners that are happy and a bunch that are not. Is it not worth it to do that rather? Because I don't think the green areas is going to work. Not even for the bokkies that are there. Now they have to walk in corridors to get to that portion.
And that's where they set the traps and the ring traps and all
Yes,
those things.
exactly.
It is a current
Cause more harm.
ground.
We cause more harm.
Ja, en hoe gaan die bokkies weer?
Sure, I think the management of a core area or conservation corridor is an extremely challenging and acknowledged challenging area. Because anytime you have to manage a conservation area or an open space area within an urban developed area in South Africa, it's a challenge. But then, do we just say we're not going to ever have any natural corridors that we protect anymore? You know, so that's on the one hand. On the other hand, there are quite a lot of things that we can do, but they cost money. The fencing, the security, the staff, to rangers to do snare patrols and all of this kind of thing. I mean, our budget, I think, even included a bucky for the team. So it's expensive. It's not cheap. And that's why it's come out quite expensive, because we really thought conservation of this nature embedded within an urban environment is going to need investment for it to work. You know, and Yaku went in our many conversations about should we have it, shouldn't we have it, what are the pros, what are the cons. He said, but if we don't do all of this, it's going to become fraught with borselappers and rubbish dumping and everything else. But if we have a proper formalized conservation management plan that's well managed, yes, there might be occasional incursions, there might be occasional snaring, but there will be mechanisms and funding in place to get to the bottom of it and deal with it. Whereas without that, there's not really very much.
Jackie, at the moment, we conserve our own space in Aalwyndal.
Yeah.
There are no little animals being snared there that we know of, because we're looking after Aalwyndal.
Yeah, look, some places are being looked after well, but then other places, and we have been to many. And I mean, for example, some of the activities that currently happen are not actually consistent with conservation at all. You know, whether that be in Aalwyndal, yes. I mean, we've found animals killed by dogs walking around, roaming free.
Location dogs.
The location
dogs. No, these are residents walking their dogs on open areas and whatnot. So, and I've got evidence.
Yeah, video footage of the dog.
I believe you that there's that as well. Yeah, I believe you that there's that as well. I'm absolutely certain of that.
I would just like to ask a question.
Okay. Sorry, I see your hand also. You haven't asked anything tonight, so we definitely have to give you an opportunity. So let's go to you first and then the developer.
I don't think, maybe you don't like my question, but why don't you spend more time and energy in the rural areas where the big problems really are?
Exactly.
You know, all the big problems are there. The rubbish dumps are there. I've driven through Kwaninkwaba myself, and I've asked many questions. Why don't we clean up Kwaninkwaba? You know, there's animals there that's been in distress. You know, but now all the focus is on Aalwyndal, but not much is done about the rural areas. If I may ask.
Okay, in terms of the, let's call it service delivery there, I can't speak on behalf of the municipality.
But the nature conservation.
Yes, so what I can say is, and Yaku will probably be quite cross with me for even mentioning this, because I know it's probably not making him very happy now, but I mean, with things like unlawful land invasion in KwaNokwaba, we are looking at offsets for that. But the applicant in this case is the municipality, so there will be payments for that kind of thing, potentially. I'm not putting the cart before the horse here, but you know, so it's, and in that respect, the application of offsets, it is being applied equitably across different sectors of society. Just because it's a land invasion and it's by people living below, you know, in poverty, doesn't mean that we can now go and just transform sensitive vegetation with no consequence. The same way that it's being applied in Aalwyndal. I don't know if that answers your question. It doesn't clear up the rubbish or provide better services. But I think every municipality in the Southern Cape is at a very cash-strapped point when it comes to that situation. We ourselves have also worked a lot in township areas, and it's a huge challenge. Yeah.
Ons het in die detail dat ons skrifbewijs is nie waar omgewingsake George is inteendeel landwyd bekend vir die kantoor wat vir enige mens wat enige ontwikkeling wil doen die meeste probleme gee. En die vraag is hoekom? Jy gaan my antwoord dat jy kan nie of jy wil. So kom ons het daar, maar moenie dink of die mense sê julle wil dit makliker maak, dit is nie waar. Dan wil ek sê, julle praat van om 'n plek te gaan beheer in terme van die man wat jy uitgeloop. Jy het gepraat van om 'n plek te bestuur wat 'n sogenaamde natuurpark moet wees. Moet hy dan bestuur word soos hierdie, wat is dit, hierdie park moet so gemors wees? Inteendeel, die volgende vraag is, perhaps you can answer that, Karen. Show me one area in South Africa where those areas are effectively managed.
Natal.
I don't know.
Natal.
But you know what I would think is enough. It's either about money, or it's about money, or it's about money.
Yes.
That's the reality about it. But we're talking the whole time about the sensitive Aalwyndal. Jy het gevra die antwoord, word ek geïnterview. Die antwoord, het jy gesê, wat moet die antwoord wees? Die antwoord is eenvoudig. Antwoord ons, ek het mekaar al gevraag, wil hy nie antwoord nie. Toe sit hy. Dus hy blakant ongeskik op my. Toe ek ordentlik gevraag, gee vir my een antwoord. Het het inteendeel oopgestel vir die Aalwyndal en Aalwyndals. Waar kom hierdie konsep vandaan? Wie? Iemand, iewers in het belangrijk, moet jy gesê, dit sal nie meer mense wees. Want hy inderdaad sal ons nou kry. Ons moet het kry. Want daar het gesê, hy sal sorg dat hy het kry. Hy moet nie eers met te gee nie. Want hierig ons kan weer hof toe gaan daar oor, en dan kan ons het kry. Die verskil is die slag, want die wet het verander. Die munisipaliteit het nie hy koste te betaal, want dit is my belastinggeld.
Ja.
Lekker.
Nou, word het vir 'n amptenaar se geld afgetrek. En dit sluit wet in. Die wet het verander in Suid-Afrika. Die antwoord is eenvoudig. Jy het gesê, wat is die oplossing? Sê julle vir ons, as Aalwyndal dan nou skielik, ek wil amper 30 jaar dan, as Aalwyndal skielik so sensitief is, wat was die oplossing, ek sê dit weer, vir Monte Cristo? Waar is hulle opset? Dis 'n aktiewe plaas in terme van, jy is omgewingssaak. Terwyl hulle vir ons hoop dat daai goedkeuring gekry. Hoe het Hartland sy goedkeuring gekry? Dis 'n plaas, chemisie.
Ja.
Hoe het hy goedkeuring gekry? Ons kan omheen en almekaar praat van opsets en opset. Dis nonsens. Skielik, vanaf ek in Jaco in 2016 gesit het en gesê, Aalwyndal moet binne in die Aalwyndal kom. En ek tot vandag toe sit. Meneer, jou Frans oor die wet sit handtekening op die brief wat sê, dis 'n most unsensitive area.
Ja.
Dit was geen probleem.
Hartland op die
kom van ontwikkeling. Hoekom is dit gestop? Wonder julle hoekom die mense wonder dat selfs in die hofsaak teen julle daar sprake was van beweerde omkopery en bedrog? Ja, daar nie. Verkeerd. Dis die rede hoekom julle voorgestel is aan julle om eerder die hofsaak nie te gaan doen nie, dit as 'n hofbevel dat julle moet instem tot 'n hofbevel teen julle. Mense, kom ons op om bullshit te praat. Die realiteit hier is, hierdie ding is politiek. Dit gaan oor geld.
Ja.
Expropriation. Waar is Hartland se opsets? Of when you really want to tell me, and I'm sure you don't know which area I'm talking about. Dat Hartland geen sensitieve diere het. Niks.
Of planting.
Of planting.
Niks, daar's niks sensitief daar.
Of renosterbos.
Renosterbos.
Bos. Vogelslaan. Op 'n wetland. Op 'n wetland, ja.
Exactly.
Even more.
Die realiteit is.
Ja.
'n Mens kan aan ander mense
Luister maar, hierdie klomp mense met 'n baie kaf.
En ons is ongelooflik dom. Gelukkig is ons nie advokaat. Ek wil nie jou beklei nie. Die realiteit is, ons beklei vir onsself. Ons beklei nie teen jou nie. Ek beklei nie teen Karel nie. Maar moet nie vir ons so klankwoorde gee nie, want dit is belaglik. Om skielik vir ons is hier ongelooflik sensitief is Aalwyndal. Dit is bullshit.
Ja.
Hoekom het Aalwyndal en sy broer plek gekoop in die eerste plek? Wie hoekom? 'n bly skaap kan eers oorleef daar.
Exactly. Exactly.
Dis 'n feit. Dis nie wat ek sê nie. Die draagkrag van Aalwyndal is heel moontlik in 'n omgewing van 12 hektaar tot 1 skaap.
Ja.
Exactly.
As dit nie meer is.
Wel, iemand maak het om geld hiervoor, is al wat ek weet.
Dit is die hele tyd ons aandag te vestig op sogenaamde offsets en offsets.
Ja. Dis United Nations goed is daar.
Individuele mense. Die EIA is wat gedoen is, jy het self gesê, deur professionele mense. Wat beteken? Dit word in hoekom is my EIA? Niks. Binne my eers begin het sommer met die 2016 brief wat Frans oor die wet geteken het. Jy weet ek sê wat ek nou sê, hy het dit op skrif gesê. Die volledige EIA. Volledig. Is daar nie een kleintjie of voeltjie met 'n pink oogie of skilpaadjie met 'n rooi neus
of 'n black area.
Daar's niks. Daar's niks. So ek so ongelooflike slegste grond. Dis mos nie logies nie.
Ja.
Soos wat sy net daar gesê het, ons staan kyk met verf en besluit. Of soos jy self, julle doen sogenaamde desktop ondersoeke. Dis mos nie realisties nie. Dis dit moontlik dat ons ook kan besef om mekaar te praat van die ontwikkelaar moet betaal, die moet betaal, daai moet betaal. Ek het 'n surprise vir die van julle wat dit nie weet nie, hoor. Ek is ongelooflik ingelig, hoor. Hierdie land is ekonomies in sy moer.
Ja, ja.
Ja.
Iewers gaan die geld opdroog. Ons kan nie aan mekaar sê iemand moet dit betaal nie.
Ek wil nie ongeskik wees nie, net daai klink soos 'n Toyota Hilux alarm.
Excellent.
Myne is om dis baie kom ken. So hy kan ons spaar mense met hande. Jy sê baie goed.
Mense, ons bestuur die regte goed.
Ja.
Ek sê vir julle, want ek sit met die skriftelike bewyse daarvan. Aalwyndal is nie sensitief nie.
Hy maak 'n klomp geld hierso en ek dink ek is klaar. Ons gaan dit bereik.
Baie maklik.
Julle hier sien.
Sê Amanda uit die se bril jy dit uitsien.
Ja.
Ja. Ek dink nie ons gaan iets verder hier bereik nie. Of iemand nog questions.
Goed, ons wil afsluit. Ek sien nie meer hande nie. You may speak. You may speak.
You have been appointed by the municipality to deliver. What is your time frame? How much time you have to report? Secondly, if the municipality is not happy with the outcome or half of the landowners, they walk away from it, they don't want to develop, don't want to sell, when can the municipality start to put the services in?
Yeah.
Yes, no, that is the way forward, and I think that will be excellent to try and conclude tonight's gathering here at the meeting. But Jackie just want to say something, and then I'll get to your point. Thank you so much for that one.
Hi again. I just wanted to really emphasize that in a public participation is really important, and we really do value your feedback. And I really mean that. So if you can please take the time to carefully compile your ideas. If you want to make suggestions for alternative arrangements of any sort, please, try and make those as clear as possible. We will take everything into account. Heck, we're already on version 5 of the plan. we're used to listening to people and then making adjustments. So that is the point of public participation. That is why we're here tonight. We have heard you, we are listening, and we can already see that there are some things that will need to be adjusted. So we will do our best to make those adjustments.
Sorry, I just have one really important point.
Sure.
Have you taken into account the airfield at the moment at its capacity currently with the UEs and the increased flying, how that will impact the nature corridors? Because I can tell you from first-hand experience, since they started flying very low, animals that haven't been really seen on our property for a while, all of a sudden I have mongoose eating my chickens that haven't been there problem since that thing started flying low.
No, we have not been doing any impact assessment related to the airfield, so I don't know the nature or movements of the...
Another case totally on its own.
Yeah.
But it's in your study.
Oh, no, but not the amount of hours that they're flying or active or the altitude or anything like that.
There's no noise
Because it's an
pollution there?
existing impact. We were doing an impact of future development.
I'm going. It's wasting our time.
The existing impact that they did is very outdated. The amount of time that has increased over the time is so significant that it actually has impact on people's animals, people's well-being.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that they changed their operation in that way. Is it a formal change?
There was a proposal done, there is a proposal on it.
Is there an impact assessment going with that proposal? Because there might be a standalone impact assessment.
That is the question.
I don't know of anything. Maybe the municipality does. I don't know.
Okay, listen, there has been a detailed airfield study done and completed.
Not accurate.
But your point is well taken there in terms of what you just said. I said that we want to conclude with a way forward, and we need to do that because people are just leaving. So let me just respect your question and give over to Jaco just to explain the way forward, and then Councillor, you can approach, and then we can conclude, please.
Okay, Jackie alluded to and said, listen, this is a public participation. You've got until the 30th of September to provide us all your comments and all your inputs. I've received a lot already. Everything is saved, everything is sent through to the consultants, and then we will get back to you on the way forward for this plan. What is services? Just regarding services, we've concluded the master planning for Aalwyndal regarding all the services, stormwater, water, sewage, electricity, everything is finalized. What we're trying to do now is to see how we can easily and the quickest get services into the area by combining areas where developers are busy to see how they can combine their efforts to pull the services in. So that is where we are. I cannot tell you regarding this document. We've heard all the comments. Once anything is assessed, we will let you know. We've got all your details on when you register, right? And we will send out emails and say what's going on. If we need to communicate anything with you, we will also use that platform. Just for interest's sake, maybe from my side, as a last sort of comment regarding the comments that was made, Hartland, Oudtshoornbosch, Renosterbos, and quite a few developments of our own, we didn't develop 50%. We actually developed less because of environmental sensitivity, because of impacts from EIAs that was done. So it's not only there, it's not targeted at Aalwyndal, it's not.
But you're not a private landlord.
Ja, ek dink Jaco stap jy so lank so om en dan gaan die meneer vir jou 'n vraag vra en dan gaan nog mense wees wat vir jou gaan vra. Ek wil jy is welkom na die tyd te kom hier. Jy kan aanhou kommentaar lewer hoor. So jy kan nog na die 30ste September aanhou kommentaar lewer. Ek hou dit by.
Vergadering wees met eienaars van Aalwyndal met die nuwe proposals voordat dit weer 'n public participation proses gaan, soos wat dit veronderstel is om te wees.
Ek dink die
volgens legislation.
Yes, okay. Let me conclude there. The question is, will there be more public participation and then specifically meetings like this one? And I think it is clear from tonight, should we proceed with this, should we change it and want to proceed, we need to have more meetings like this. with the owners of Aalwyndal. So we take that as a suggestion going forward, and definitely we'll try to keep to that one. Ek wil graag afsluit, want hier is nou regtig mense en wil ek vra dat indien nie enige vrae kom gerus vorentoe en dan hanteer ons dit op daai wyse. Raas het Stefan het hier enigiets om te sê? Dis u reg? Okay. So from my side, I want to thank you all for coming. Thank you for respecting me as the chairperson tonight and for leading this meeting. And please have a blessed evening. Dankie almal.